The future. Everyone is born with their own identity marked on their head. There were labels for starving commoners, for loyal and brave knights, and for fierce and cruel kings. But after you transmigrated, you found yourself surrounded by kneeling people. According to the label on your head, you were the heir to a kingdom of 1.4 billion citizens. In the Middle Ages, 1.4 billion citizens, such a number was enough to everyone. At this moment, you looked at the villagers kneeling uniformly before you, feeling a bit at a loss. Because of the language barrier, you issued various commands in Chinese. These villagers remained kneeling on the ground, motionless. You rubbed your forehead in frustration. Yesterday, you got lost in the forest, were surrounded by a pack of wolves, and then rescued by a young boy. Due to extreme fright, you fell into a coma. When you woke up again, you were in this strange village. Just then, you felt someone tugging at your pant leg. You lowered your head and saw the blonde girl who had brought water earlier. Kneeling, she quietly raised her head, gazing at you with her beautiful deep blue eyes. Her pink lips slightly parted. She mouthed something to you. You, guessing the girl's intention, tried to mouth and speak those words. The next moment, the people kneeling on the ground all stood up, but didn't stand straight. Instead, they remained in a boat posture. After respectfully stepping back a few paces, they turned and quickly left. But after everyone except the blonde girl had left, you let out a long sigh of relief. Just then, a middle-aged man in a sheepskin robe carrying a plump gray rabbit hurried over from a distance. When he saw you look at him, his face quickly showed both deference and awe. Without hesitation, he knelt on both knees and lowered his head, seemingly about to kiss your bare feet. A shiver ran down your spine. You quickly said, "Bulkar." Upon hearing your words, this man in the sheepskin robe quickly stood up. On his heavily wrinkled face, a hint of awkwardness clearly appeared. He awkwardly rubbed the back of his head, respectfully placed the gray rabbit he was carrying on the ground, and was about to turn and leave. The blonde girl beside you, seeing this, quickly called out to the middle-aged man. Afterwards, after they communicated in a language you didn't understand, the middle-aged man looked as if he had suddenly understood. He gave you a reserved smile, and after saying a lot more to the blonde girl, he finally left, satisfied. Back in the wooden hut, the girl stood before you. With one hand, she held a rabbit's ear, and with the other, she extended a slender finger to point at herself. "Anelia," the girl gently said to you. You slowly pronounced the girl's name. Then the girl brought a bowl of water, and pointing with her finger at the water remaining in the bowl, said water. You repeated after her. You knew the girl was teaching you the language of this place. In the time that followed, you stayed in the wooden hut, learning the language with Anelia. Every day, the middle-aged man in the sheepskin robe would respectfully bring food. Most of the time it was rabbits, sometimes a basket of fruit or a lamb leg. For some reason, it was as if you had divine help. The content Anelia taught, you would instantly remember and understand, and never forget. Moreover, you could even infer other things, and deduce their names. In just 3 short days, you were already naturally having daily conversations with Anelia. At the same time, you finally understood what kind of place this was, and why the people here were so respectful towards you. According to Anelia's narration, this is the kingdom of Xianxia, located on the western continent. On its southern border, there is a village on the edge of Black Wolf Ridge. Because it was rich in high-quality fruits, it was called Fruitland Village. The lord is the noble Viscount Hughes. The forest where you got lost is called Wolf Howl Forest. Many packs of wild wolves live there. There are even rumors that the extremely ferocious demonic beast, Black Elder, also lives there. As for why the villagers here were so respectful towards him, you glanced at the water tank. The long string of white text above your head. The corners of your mouth twitched involuntarily. In this world, all higher intelligent beings, such as humans, elves, orcs, and so on, would have an identity tag appearing above their heads. Be it commoner, noble, or king. The origin of these tags was no longer known. Some said it was the exalted creator of the world, others said it was the great dwelling god. These tags were not just decorative, they also bestowed various wondrous abilities upon their owners. For example, a noble tag could enhance one's appearance, intellect, talent, and even elusive luck. A commoner tag, on the other hand, could make people more resilient. To express gratitude for the blessings these tags brought, people called these tags Jihu, meaning blessed by heaven, and the Jihu above your head, translated, was heir to the kingdom of 1.4 billion citizens. You finally understood why these villagers, upon seeing you for the first time, all knelt down. Put yourself in their shoes and imagine if you were a villager in the Middle Ages who had never even left your village, and you saw someone elegantly dressed, with fair skin, hands without calluses, bearing such an incredibly impressive identifier firmly displayed. They would also immediately kneel down and kiss the other person's shoe tips. Oh, right. Since Jihu tags all bring wondrous abilities, that means... Your eyes narrowed at this thought. Majian's gaze focused on the water tank, on the text above his head. After staring for about 3 to 5 seconds, below the white text, a new line of text appeared. Linguistic aptitude. Communication is the first essential for understanding. You can learn a language in a very short time and reach native speaker proficiency. Are you worthy of such an extensive title? You sighed, only feeling that the future was bleak. In other words, you transmigrated to this medieval-like other world. And your only cheat was merely the ability to quickly learn the local language. Besides that, you had no family, no land, no friends, nor even a single coin. Your only possessions were the modern clothes on your body, and a mobile phone that was out of battery and turned off. Even, you couldn't afford the food expenses for the days Anelia had taken you in. Respected Prince Mingyu, the village chief, and also my adoptive father, Mr. Robert, wishes to see you. At this moment, a soft knock came from the room's door. Anelia's gentle voice was heard. Even during these 3 days of language learning, you had asked the girl several times to just call you by your name. But the girl still maintained a respectful, almost embarrassing attitude towards him. The village chief. Your adoptive father. That sheepskin-clad middle-aged man who delivers meat every day, or fruit. What does he want with me? He's not going to ask me to settle the food expenses for these days. Is he? Thinking this, a hint of bitterness appeared on your face. You were now a genuine penniless pauper. If the other party really did that, you might only be able to repay the debt by doing manual labor. Prince Mingyu, if you don't wish to see him, I will decline on your behalf, seeing you didn't respond for a long time. Anelia outside the door thought you had refused. No. Let him in, you said. Speaking up again. You thought about it, and then agreed. You want to gain a foothold in this world, then you can't just keep staying in a small wooden house. You must interact with more people. And the village chief is undoubtedly a good person to interact with. You should be able to get from him quite a bit of information. Your esteemed highness, my humble self and my beautiful daughter send our greetings. May the gods protect you. As soon as he entered, after setting down the basket brimming with fruit he carried, Robert pulled Anelia along to perform a full prostration. Fortunately, you stopped him in time. Sit, you gestured. Your Highness, you are too kind. Robert smiled ingratiatingly, rubbing his palms, but still dared not sit on a chair. He just stood there awkwardly. You felt a bit helpless, even though this wooden house was his own. In that case, He had no choice but to stand as well. Village chief, may I ask the purpose of your visit? You spoke directly. Your Highness, I heard from my daughter that you have already learned the language. For this, I specifically came. Firstly, I wish to congratulate you on your truly exceptional learning talent. Secondly, I want to ask what your needs are. For instance, if your living quarters are too humble, if you need more meat in your diet, and if you are satisfied with the fruit that was sent, Robert asked, his face wreathed in smiles. This was somewhat unexpected for you. You had thought he would first ask which country you were from, and why you couldn't even understand the language. Now, it seemed, this village chief had no intention of probing your origins, only blindly flattering you. If possible, I would like to meet the person who saved me, you pondered and said. You were quite impressed by the one who shot an arrow, fly, hitting the awful wolf's eye. That formidable person left a deep impression. What's more, they also saved your life. In any case, even from the most basic moral standpoint, you should also express your gratitude. By the sun god. Your Highness, the person you speak of must be Little Berg. Correct. He is, after all, in our village, the most talented young man. Without any guidance or teaching, he achieved the hunter profession solely by himself. Unlike the other young people, who can only continue to be farmers like us. You might not know the game from these past few days. He also proactively asked me to deliver to you. He truly is a warm-hearted and polite young man, Robert recounted effusively. Until Xianxia, unable to bear it any longer, kicked his heel from behind. Only then did he realize his own probing. Your Highness, please forgive my foolishness. We humble folk truly lack manners. Robert scratched his head awkwardly. I'll go fetch Little Berg now. With that, as if to alleviate the awkwardness, Robert hurriedly left, completely ignoring Xianxia's urgent, hinting gaze from the side. Not long thereafter, Robert returned with a youth carrying a quiver and bow, a lean-faced, aloof youth, into the wooden house. On the youth's head, there were also 2 lines of white text. One was commoner, the other was hunter. Commoner was a status attribute. Hunter was a profession attribute. Unlike status attributes determined at birth, profession attributes are acquired through later accumulation. They also bestow various abilities upon their owner. For example, in the village, the profession attribute for most people is farmer, which allows their planted crops to yield a bit more. Your Highness, this is Little Berg, Robert introduced respectfully. Then he gestured for the other to bow. Berg, without hesitation, was about to bend and kneel. But fortunately, you stopped him in time. You are my savior. There is no custom in this world that demands a savior to kneel, you quickly said. Esteemed Highness, you flatter me too much. That I could save your noble self from the pack of wolves is by no means a kindness from me to you, but rather my honor. Guoj was so calm that this was not an improvisation, but rather, in the past few days, he had already thought through his downfall in his heart overnight. After all, saving a distressed heir to a super kingdom, this was undoubtedly the most crucial moment in his life, and a precious opportunity that could never be replicated. Is there anything I can do for you? After a moment of hesitation, you still asked hesitantly. Repaying kindness was your principle. Although you knew that he, who was now offering his thoughts, possessed nothing, and what he could repay was very limited. But the moral values shaped by society over the past 20 years still made him unable to resist speaking out. Helping you is my honor. How could I possibly make any demands? Borg said without hesitation. However, I do have one request, which I hope your benevolent self can grant. On his slightly weathered face, clearly enjoyed a hint of the western scenery. Your expression shifted. Because even if the other party only requested a small amount of money, he, with empty pockets, would also be powerless. If there was truly no other way, he could only sell the modern clothes on his body. Under your tense gaze, Bort finally spoke. Please accept me as your attendant. Your mind was racing with questions. You saved me. And now you want to be my attendant, Your Highness. Please rest assured. As the great God of Sun and Justice has revealed to me, will never act independently under evil influence. I am willing to dedicate my life for your safety, and obey your every command, whether reasonable or unreasonable, righteous or unrighteous. I will strive to complete it. I only ask that your radiance may shine upon me, so that I may pursue the path of a strong one that I yearn for. Bort knelt on one knee and solemnly declared like a knight. His voice was clear and powerful, and his chiseled face was full of sincerity. You fell silent for a moment. Honestly speaking, you actually quite wanted to agree. After all, having nothing after transmigrating, if you could take in someone who with one arrow shot dead an alpha wolf, a fierce person, to be your subordinate, at least your basic safety would be guaranteed. But did you remember the latter half of the other party's oath? In your impression, the relationship between a medieval liege lord and an attendant or knight was actually a mutually beneficial relationship. In fact, while an attendant must faithfully offer everything to their liege lord, even their life, at the same time, the liege lord also had an obligation to provide them with protection and appropriate respect. If behind him, there truly was a kingdom of 1.4 billion people backing him, then, facing Borg, who had saved his life from the wolf's mouth, you would definitely, without hesitation, agree to his request. The problem was that you were now merely a fellow with a terrifying-sounding identity and name only, but in reality, a marginalized person with nothing. You simply couldn't fulfill Borg's requests. Therefore, you naturally shouldn't accept his loyalty. Otherwise, when the truth was revealed, you might just end up like that wild wolf, shot in the eye with an arrow by an enraged Borg and die. Time was passing minute by minute. The warmth on Boja's face gradually froze. He realized something was amiss. It was towards Xianxia beside you that he cast a pleading gaze, hoping that this good elder sister, who had watched him grow up since childhood, could help him out at this crucial moment in his life. In his opinion, his beautiful and charming elder sister, who was like a love goddess descended to earth, having spent 3 days and nights with this noble highness, should have long since achieved a relationship of intimate pleasure. Therefore, speaking up to persuade him should still be within his highness's range of tolerance. Feeling Borg's pitiful gaze, Xianxia was, after all, somewhat unable to bear it. His lips quivered. Just as she was about to speak, she was firmly held by Robert, who was beside her, by the shoulder. Xianxia, puzzled, looked at her adoptive father. She knew how much Robert valued Borg, even raising him as his own son. In response, Robert merely shook his head firmly. Although I'm sorry, Borg, but he had to use this precious one and only chance on that matter. The sturdy young woman could only recall a helpless look. Regarding the eye contact between the three, you, lost in thought with your head bowed, did not notice. A long time later, you finally spoke. I'm sorry. I need a few more days to think about this. You clearly saw a fleeting shadow in his dark eyes. After thinking for 3 days, you still decided to take a few more days to think. After all, what if you really got a cheat ability? As soon as these words were spoken, Brother Bo's face, which had been filled with warmth, was instantly covered by deep disappointment. In his opinion, this was undoubtedly a polite rejection and noble rhetoric. Even if I saved your life, would the noble you still be unwilling to accept someone of humble birth like me as your attendant? Borg suppressed the unwillingness and disappointment in his heart, stood up, bowed slightly, and then, with his head down and shoulders slumped, turned and left. Anyone could see his loneliness from his retreating figure. Your Highness, I still need to attend to matters in the village, so I will take my leave first. After Borg left, Robert also chose to leave. Only you and Anelia remained in the wooden house. Miss Anelia, could you show me around the village? You thought to yourself that in order to learn the language, you had stayed cooped up in the wooden house for 3 whole days. It was also time to get some fresh air. And by the way, gather more information about this world. After all, no matter how much you hear, it's not as profound as seeing it with your own eyes. My pleasure. Your Highness. The blonde girl stood on tiptoe, holding up her linen tunic, and curtsied slightly. Although her clothes were simple and even patched, her graceful movements and delicate, fair smiling face made her appear like Cinderella from a fairy tale. It's just a pity that Cinderella eventually marries a prince, while he was just an ordinary 1 in 1.4 billion. It was afternoon at this moment. Sunlight filtered through the sparse clouds, dappled, scattering onto the winding dirt paths in the village. It was as if the land was draped in a layer of gentle golden sand. You and Anelia walked along the dirt path for a while. And then, what came into view were circles of lush green fruit trees with tempting bright red fruits, adorned like brilliant red rubies on the dark green branches and leaves. It was as beautiful as a delicate oil painting. In the air, a rich, fresh fruity scent permeated, making one's mouth water. At least your appetite had been piqued. Anelia, standing beside you, noticed this. So, with a smile, she said, Your Highness, would you like to try some? You nodded heavily. Hearing this, the girl took light steps to the largest fruit tree in the orchard, a towering tree that would take 4 or 5 people to encircle and was tens of meters high. And the fruits on it were the brightest red. Uncle, you're working hard. Anelia, towards the top of the fruit tree, where a middle-aged villager was standing on a ladder picking fruit, waved her hand and shouted. Because she shouted too hard, her originally charming voice, like a clear spring, was a little hoarse. And the villager who heard the sound looked down in confusion. When he saw Anelia waving, his expression was smiling. But when he saw the young man beside the girl, whose head had a string of white text above it, his expression turned to one of terror. Your Highness. What an effort to show yourself. He almost fell off the ladder. Luckily, he grabbed on in time. Otherwise, from such a height, he would probably have been smashed to death. However, his being smashed to death was a minor matter. If it were to stain the eyes of His Highness, causing their village, the most beautiful flower, Anelia, to be affected by His Highness's wrath, it would be too sinful. Even if he died, he wouldn't forgive himself. Thinking of this, Xingwo was as agile as a monkey climbing a tree, quickly scrambling down the ladder. Greetings to your Highness. Before the noble His Highness, Xingwo prostrated himself on the ground, hands and feet touching. His voice, so nervous it seemed squeezed out from between his teeth, was trembling. You said softly. This word means revelation. As for Kala, it means withdrawal. After receiving permission, the villager slowly stood up again. However, he still maintained a bowed posture. Uncle Xingwo, His Highness wishes to taste the fruits from our orchard. Please present the sweetest fruits you picked today to His Highness, Anelia said softly. Her voice, as melodious as silver bells, was even sweeter than the fruit fragrance filling the air. All right. This is an honor for our Golan village. Xingwo, who had been incredibly nervous, instantly became excited. His face flushed red. He put down the fruit basket filled with fruits from his back. Then he buried his head in the pile of fruits, rummaging through them. A moment later, he held up a red bean fruit with both hands, presenting the fruit, whose skin was smooth as silk. To you, Your Highness, I dare to swear by the great sun and God of justice, this fruit is one of the best red fruits I have picked in my 20 years of harvesting fruit trees, painstakingly and earnestly tanned until deeply dark. His flushed face was full of seriousness. This also let you know the name of this fruit. Red fruit is quite fitting. It's very much like the red apples on Blue Heart, only smaller in size and more rounded. Thank you for the treat. You took the red fruit from his palm and bit into it. In an instant, a stream of sweet juice surged in your mouth, bursting forth. It carried a hint of coolness and a perfect sweetness. It was neither overly cloying, nor did it lose its natural, refreshing flavor. The pulp was even more crisp and delicious, neither too soft nor too hard, with just the right firmness, making him unable to resist wanting to continue chewing. It's one of the best fruits I've ever eaten, you exclaimed sincerely. Hearing this, Xingwo's complexion was as if painted with red pigment. It was so flushed that one might wonder if his blood vessels would burst the next moment. I noble His Highness praising my cultivated produce. This is the happiest day of my life, even happier than the day Li Bo married me. The middle-aged villager was as excited as a child, gesticulating wildly. By the gods above, Your Highness, I must present you with another basket of the highest quality red fruits. After bidding farewell to Xingwo, you and Anelia continued side by side, walking through the dense orchard. At this moment, the afternoon sun gently filtered through the dense branches of the forest, casting dappled light upon the two of them. One was a handsome and refined dark-haired youth, the other a beautiful young woman, with golden hair and blue eyes. In the prime of her youth, under the sunlight, they truly looked like an enchanting pair of celestial lovers. The twilight sun poured down like molten gold, dyeing the horizon an orange red. This, combined with the distant pale green forest, wove into a dreamlike scene. What a truly beautiful village! I hope such beauty can last forever, you exclaimed. After touring a large area of the surrounding orchard, you and Anelia returned to the wooden house. Hearing this, the girl who had been smiling all day by your side suddenly had her smile freeze on her pretty face. In her deep blue eyes, a clear hint of worry flashed. Perhaps it's time to tell him about that matter, the girl decided to herself. Your Highness, such a beautiful scene won't last much longer, Anelia whispered softly. Her heart was very tense at this moment, but still, she tried her best to keep her voice clear and sweet. Is it because autumn has arrived? It's all right. The yellowing fallen leaves are also beautiful. You smiled slightly. No, it's not because of that, Anelia shook her head. A hint of bitterness appeared on her fair face. In a few more days, Lord will send people to collect the agricultural tax. But the money accumulated in the village is far from enough to pay. Hearing this, the smile on your face gradually disappeared. Is the agricultural tax too heavy? Chen Shen arrived at the department. The agricultural tax set by Lord for Guolan village is already quite generous within the kingdom of Socha. In previous years, we could all afford to pay it. He is a kind lord, but this year an accident occurred. Some time ago, a clay merchant came to our village. He highly praised the red fruits produced in Berlin, claiming their taste was simply unparalleled in the world. Selling them to the free citizens in the capital would surely bring in a lot of money. So, he promised that when the red fruits ripened, he would buy them at a high price. The condition was that before his arrival, the village must reject acquisitions from other merchants. Because his eloquence was indeed very good, many people in the village were persuaded by him. Although my adoptive father still had doubts, he later paid a generous deposit. In addition, most villagers expressed their agreement, so my adoptive father could only agree. As he had said, our village rejected other merchants who came to buy red fruits. But until 2 days before the harvest, he, who arrived belatedly, did not offer the promised price. Instead, he proposed a price far lower than the normal market price, even close to a loss-making price. As she spoke, the young girl's lips tightened shrewdly, and her brows furrowed into a knot. In her deep blue eyes, a faint memory seemed to linger, just like an enraged fawn. It was your first time seeing Anelia look so angry. You had thought that a beautiful and charming girl like her would never get angry in her life. The villagers angrily drove away that clay merchant. Injured. It was already too late to find other merchants. Moreover, the red fruits were already fully ripe. Every day that passed, ripe fruits would fall to the ground, gradually rot, and become worthless. In a few days, it would be the day the Lord sent people to collect taxes. And once they couldn't pay enough tax, some villagers would be demoted to slaves, taken away and sold into slavery. Their fate would only be endless humiliation, and a fate worse than death. The young girl's expression gradually became sorrowful, and those beautiful, deep blue eyes also lost their former sparkle, becoming profound and distant. So I thought, if there was someone of sufficiently noble status who could persuade the tax collectors to wait a little longer and let us gather enough tax, that would be great. Those pleading eyes slowly turned, finally settling on the expressionless black-haired youth before her, and on the long string of white text above your head. Feeling that fervent gaze full of expectation, you fell silent. For a moment, you didn't know what to do. If it were possible, you would naturally be willing to help this beautiful girl who taught him language, and those kind villagers. After all, it was just a matter of speaking up and giving advice. But the premise of all this was whether you had the ability to help. You were just 1 in 1.4 billion ordinary people, with an identity that sounded awe-inspiring, but in reality, for this new world, you were a marginalized person with nothing. Your country didn't even exist on this continent, nor even among the stars here. Maybe Trick Gwolin. These villagers who had never left the village might be okay. But facing someone like Viscount Hughes, a well-informed lord, they would probably be seen through very easily. By then, he would instead implicate Anelia in turn, and they would be punished by the angry lord. At this thought, you made a decision. I'm sorry, Anelia. You finished speaking calmly, then ignored the golden-haired girl whose face was full of pleading, and went straight back to your room. Don't agree to things you can't do from the beginning. Otherwise, it will only cause the promised party to make a misjudgment, leading things to an outcome worse than failure. In the room of the wooden house, by the light of an oil lamp, you tossed and turned on the hard bed, yet remained unable to fall asleep. Your thoughts were still caught up in what had happened at dusk. I just left Anelia like that. She must be very disappointed. You placed your palm in front of you and examined it, recalling how in these past few days, the girl had cared for your mood, and felt nothing but endless self-reproach. You turned your head and looked, only to see in the corner of the room a full basket of bright, succulent red fruits. Those were all sent by the kind uncle you met in the orchard today. This basket of fruit made your sense of self-reproach even stronger. Your hand clenched tightly, and your slender knuckles turned slightly white from the effort. I want to help them, but as I am now, I would only bring them disaster. If my identity and family background were real, that would be great. No. Wait. Strictly speaking, it seems it really is true. It's just completely useless here. You gently tapped your forehead with your hand, trying to force yourself to come up with a solution to the predicament. The crisis the village faced was fundamentally due to insufficient tax payments, or into words, no money. And the reason for this situation was that damn Claren merchant, who swindled the village, leading to the red fruits piling up and being unsellable, thus preventing them from paying agricultural taxes, and so on. The merchant. You vaguely felt. You seemed to have found a way to break the deadlock. On the morning of the 4th, you finished washing up early in the morning, and quickly found the young man who had saved you from the wolf pack. You knocked on his door. The door slowly opened. Your Highness, when he saw you, Berg subconsciously wanted to kneel on one knee, but you stopped him. You want to be my attendant, right? Can you help me accomplish one thing first? I couldn't ask for more. Your Highness, he replied calmly. Seeing that things had taken a turn for the better, Berg agreed without hesitation. Under the dazzling sunlight, a winding path cut through the dense forest, leading straight into the distance. Are you sure this is the only way to Fruitland village? From a bush not far away, you asked Berg beside you with a frown. Yes, Your Highness. If we don't take this path, we'd have to go a long way around through the forest to get there, Berg replied. Your Highness, what should we do next? Hide. Then get your bow and arrows ready. We'll wait for the prey to come. Your gaze turned cold. Those who don't want others to live shouldn't expect to live themselves. Berg quickly finished packing his things and followed you out of the village. Then, according to your plan, he guarded the only main road connecting the village to the outside world. Prey. On a road like this, used by people, how could there be any prey? Berg's face showed confusion. In his opinion, to hunt prey, one definitely had to go deep into the forest. The more remote the place, the rarer the prey. Have you forgotten that Claren who swindled your village? The merchant, however. Your casual remark. This immediately ignited Bog's fury. Of course I remember. That damn Klein bastard. To deceive everyone, he didn't hesitate to make false vows before the gods. He insulted the gods, and he insulted us, causing so much of our hard work, a full year's worth, the red bones we cultivated, to be utterly wasted. Bog gritted his teeth. His eyes seemed to spit fire. If I hadn't been hunting in the forest then, I would have surely shot him dead with an arrow. Wait. Your Highness. Could the prey you mentioned be him? Bog suddenly realized. With slightly sweaty hands, you asked. Have you ever killed anyone? No, Bog shook his head. Although he often hunted wild beasts, the beasts he killed, their corpses could pile up into a small hill. But he had indeed never killed a human. Neither have I, you secretly thought to yourself. But this didn't stop you from feigning the appearance of someone accustomed to seeing dead bodies. Are you willing to kill? You asked faintly. If it's this kind of heartless, ruthless black-hearted merchant harming people, then no matter how many there are, I'm willing to slaughter them all. Bog ran his finger along the bowstring. A hint of killing intent flashed in his brown eyes. The two of them thus hid in the bushes, on the side of the road. Half an hour later, a figure, leading a carriage, appeared on the road. It was none other than Mills, who had deceived the simple villagers. Mills carefully pondered the business opportunity. They should be sober now. Taxes are due soon. I am their only savior. This time, I'll offer a purchase price of 1/4 or 1/5. If it's not enough for taxes, then they can sell themselves to me as slaves. Because many slaves died in the recent riot, the price of slaves in the slave city recently has soared. Just then, accompanied by a whooshing sound, a sharp arrow shot out from the bushes not far away, accurately hitting the eye of the horse he was riding. Accompanied by a dull, painful whinny, the horse's body shuddered violently and then crashed to the ground. Who shot that arrow? Mills, who had fallen from the horse, looked for the direction the arrow came from, both shocked and enraged. The direction from which it was shot. He quickly spotted two figures in the bushes, not far away. However, before he could open his mouth to question them, another arrow whistled through the air at an extremely fast speed, rapidly flying towards his right eye. Mill's hair stood on end from shock. He wanted to dodge, but it was already too late to react. Success! Seeing this scene, Bog excitedly walked out from the bushes, ready to thoroughly check how much ill-gotten money this black-hearted merchant had in his money bag. However, What he didn't expect was that the arrow he had shot with all his might, at the moment it was about to pierce the opponent's eyeball, seemed to hit an invisible shield. After a thud of impact, the arrow shaft bent and fell to the ground. What kind of magic is that? Bog's eyes widened in shock. His proud archery was actually blocked so easily. You. Still standing in the bushes to conceal your identity. You. Who are blessed. Were equally surprised. After all, it was your first time seeing the extraordinary powers of this world. But you quickly calmed down. Remembering, to make a move means death, you couldn't stop. Bog. Keep shooting arrows. You shouted. You just don't believe the opponent can keep using such a method indefinitely. On the other side, Mills, who had blocked the arrow, quickly took out a small hand crossbow from the satchel hanging on the horse's corpse. That was a protective sharp weapon he had bought with heavy gold. Seeing that the hunter who had just shot the arrow quickly recovered from his state of shock and continued to knock an arrow and shoot, Mills' jaw clenched tightly. Quickly aimed his weapon at the opponent's body. This was his last chance. Two sharp arrows brushed past each other in the air. One accurately shot towards Mills' head. Missed route, but only crookedly grazed Berg's shoulder. After all, Mills was just a merchant. He didn't understand any swordsmanship. Bang! The arrow. At the moment it was about to touch Mills' head, as if it had encountered a transparent shield. Just like before. After a bang, the arrow shaft bent and fell to the ground. However, his expression began to turn panicked. Damn it, Mills cursed. Then, without hesitation, he untied the bulging money bag from his waist. Using all his strength, he threw it towards the hunter who was still trying to shoot arrows. After that, he turned and ran without hesitation. His speed was like that of a startled wild rabbit, nimbly weaving through the forest, disappearing in the blink of an eye. The ability directly granted to him by the lying merchant had two parts. One was improper protection. It could withstand to improper attacks. The other was to increase his running speed. But it could only be used when fleeing. His two protections had been used up. If he continued to fight, his life would be in danger. Although he loved money more than anything, but it was still secondary to his trust. What's more, most of his assets had already been exchanged for gold souls and hidden in his shoe store. The money in the money bag was only a portion. The hundreds of coins scattered from the money bag clattered and obscured Berg's vision, and made him, who had never seen so much money, experience a moment of emotional fluctuation. When he came back to his senses and re-aimed, he found that Mills' figure had already disappeared into the dense forest. I'm sorry, Your Highness. I failed to kill him. Berg regretfully held his head and bowed down. He felt that he was too foolish to have performed so poorly in front of his future Lord Commander. Now, the other party probably wouldn't even want to be his Lord Commander anymore. It's all right. Count how much money there is. Looking at the dense, quiet forest ahead, although he felt a bit uneasy inside, but the prince still comforted him. He certainly didn't want this main fighter in the village to lose his fighting spirit against zombies. Your Highness, it's a total of 16 silver souls and 83 copper souls. Berg held a large handful of shimmering silver coins in both hands. With a face full of pleasant surprise, he said, "This guy is indeed a cunning merchant. He's quite wealthy," the prince exclaimed. According to what Nani understood, the currency issued by the kingdom of Socha was called Sol. They were copper souls, silver souls, and gold souls. 80 copper souls could be exchanged for 1 silver soul, and 40 silver souls could be exchanged for 1 gold soul. A basket full of fresh red fruits, but at normal market price, it could only sell for 10 copper souls. and the entire Gulen village. The agricultural tax that needed to be paid to the Lord in a year only required 21 silver souls. Berg asked, "If we bring this money back to the village, will it be enough to pay the agricultural tax?" he asked. "Enough, Your Highness. Although Gulen village doesn't have much money right now, but for silver souls, if everyone pitches in, it will still be enough." Berg nodded vigorously. His eyes were full of shock. He had originally thought that this noble prince would take all the money. He didn't expect him to take not a single coin, but instead leave it all to the village for tax payment. It was simply completely unlike a noble. This also made a trace of respect rise in his heart for the prince. "Thank you for your generosity and wisdom, Your Highness. Even if you are unwilling to accept me as your attendant, I am still willing to serve you for the rest of my life." Berg knelt down, said solemnly with a smile. He did not answer. "Burn this carriage. By the way, Your Highness, how did you confirm that Klee person, the itinerant merchant, would definitely return?" The two of them, holding the money bags and some goods that had fallen out of the carriage. On the way back, Broji couldn't help but speak, because he had paid a deposit to a creature like a merchant. With their calm demeanor, for money, they would not hesitate to step into the noose around their own neck. How could they tolerate their money being wasted for nothing? So, he would definitely return, even if he knew he might be killed by the angry villagers, because capital never stops. Days later, Wolf Howl Forest. The lingering sunlight shone on the old oak tree in the center of the village. Mottled tree shadows swayed on the ground. At this moment, the place was already packed with people, surrounding the entire old oak tree so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass. And in the shade of the oak tree, a knight on a tall horse was quietly waiting. His face was weathered by time. His gaze was sharp and cold. He wore a large beard. His height was over 1.7 meters. His age was likely around 40. He wore a piece of armor that shimmered in the sunlight, a gleaming lamellar armor. It was woven from thousands of steel rings. Its surface was as smooth as a mirror and incredibly hard. In the center of the breastplate, a ferocious wolf's head was carved. Even its fangs were depicted lifelike, making one shudder with fear. And the most eye-catching detail was, on top of his head were two lines of emerald green labels, respectively, attendant and knight. Behind the knight were several attendants also on horseback, and a carriage, clearly used for carrying tax money. The green text identity class and occupation class. Is this what Berg called the transcendent ranks? You, hidden in the crowd, watched this scene and thought to yourself. You had heard Berg say before that anyone with white text was uniformly called a mortal rank, and above the mortal ranks were the transcendent ranks. At this point, the text above their heads would turn emerald green. After reaching this rank, no matter what their profession, even a farmer could obtain various wondrous and incredible abilities, and people of transcendent ranks could hide their occupation class. The one they ambushed earlier, that claimant male merchant without an occupation class above his head, should have been a transcendent professional. Fortunately, the other party was a merchant. If it were this transcendent professional knight in front of them, there was no doubt that he and Berg combined couldn't withstand a single blow from him. The ranks of identity and occupation were separate. It was very possible for a person's identity class to be white, but their occupation class to be green. Guerdi had always hoped to raise his hunter class to the transcendent rank, but unfortunately, because there was no one to teach him, nor any knowledge about advancement, so for 3 whole years, he had made no progress. This lamellar armor looks really good. If he were to wear it in combat, and also a helmet, he could probably easily take on 10. You adjusted your straw hat, thinking to yourself. At this moment, on his head, he was wearing a circular straw hat so large it looked comical. Although it was a bit ugly, it could effectively hide the label above his head. If it weren't for it, you wouldn't risk your identity being exposed to the view of the nobles and come to watch. Besides that, he also wore a linen robe, covering the modern clothes he had on underneath. Village chief of Gulen village, come see me. After seeing that the number of people around was no longer increasing, the knight shouted. A moment later, wearing Robert, dressed in a sheepskin robe, walked out from the crowd, slowly came before the knight. Respected Knight Thorin, I am village chief Robert. I welcome your arrival on behalf of all villagers. Robert bowed respectfully and said, has everyone arrived? Solin's demeanor was cold. His expression was stern, his voice like the clashing of cold iron. All the villagers from Daywanwolan village have gathered here. After Robert looked around, he then publicly declared, according to the regulations of my lord, your great liege, Viscount Hughes, your villages, agricultural tax and hunting tax to be paid this year, added together, total 21 silver souls and 70 for copper souls. Have they all been collected? Solon replied solemnly. My lord, they have all been collected. Robert was all smiles. He gestured behind him, and a villager, carrying a bulging money bag, came to the tree by the old lane. Go count it. Solon casually pointed to a retinue member behind him, ordering the retinue member to dismount. He bent down and carefully counted the currency in the money bag. The constant sound of coins clinking was heard. The surrounding villagers all watched this scene with nervous eyes. After all, the upcoming result would determine their fate, whether they could continue as farmers, living stable lives, or be demoted to slaves, whose remaining lives would be spent in endless insult and overwhelming heavy labor, slowly waiting for death. My lord, it has been counted. It's a total of 21 silver souls plus 80 copper forward. After a long while, the retinue member looked up, with a hint of joy on his face, saying, well done. We have perfectly fulfilled our duty as subjects. Hearing this, Knight Solon, his tightly furrowed brows on his face slightly relaxed. He praised Robert in an approving tone. This is our honor, my lord. May the gods bless the great Lord Hughes. Robert quickly bowed and replied. He didn't know how many times he had to bow that day. Very good. If only other villages could be as loyal as you. Knight Solon sighed faintly. I don't know what's going on this year. Several villages haven't been able to pay their taxes. It's caused me trouble. I even had to specially drag them off to sell to slave traders. Even though the tax, set by my benevolent lord, is already the lowest in the entire kingdom of Xianxia, these serfs still can't gather enough. They are truly foolish beyond redemption, completely wasting the lord's good intentions. Recalling the unfulfilled task for his lord, Knight Solon couldn't help but complain, looking indignant. Those people are truly ungrateful, on the surface. Robert was all smiles. But deep down, he felt, for those villagers who were about to be sent to the city of slaves, a deep sense of sympathy and sorrow. If their village hadn't met a noble and generous highness, they too would likely have met such a tragic end. All right. I still have to go to the next village to collect taxes. In consideration of your having paid all your taxes, I will request my lord to grant you a certain commendation. Knight Solon ordered his retinue to place the money bag onto the carriage, then turned the horses around, preparing to leave. Wait! Just as Knight Solon was about to leave with his retinue, he saw a merchant riding a horse, shouting loudly as he ran from afar. This scene made Yu and Bert in the crowd change expressions simultaneously. Because that person was none other than the clay man they had ambushed a few days ago. Merchant Mills. What is it? Looking at the panting Mills before him, Knight Solon frowned slightly. He gripped the hilt of the sword at his waist and questioned him. His time is very precious, and he doesn't want to waste it on a merchant. I want to expose that the villagers here, the tax money they paid, was all stolen from me, Mills said furiously. Hearing this, Knight Solon's eyes turned cold. Enough. Merchant. This is the land under my lord's rule. If you dare to casually slander his subjects, I will surely cut out your tongue. Soren drew the longsword from his waist. It was an adamantite longsword, glistening in the sunlight. Its sharp tip pointed directly at the head of the man who had caused harm. Mill's face turned pale at this sight. He knew very well that the opponent only needed one arrow to split him in two. Even his ability to cause harm through direct lies or improper protection would not work. Because the knight killing him for his honor would undoubtedly be considered a righteous act. At this moment, Mills was even frightened by the fear of death, wanting to retreat then and there. But ultimately, the desire to not lose money, and a surge of resentment in his heart, kept him standing his ground. "Sir Knight, I am Mills, the peddler. As you can see, this is my profession." "Sir." Mills swallowed. He said, trembling. Next to the commoner tag above his head, another tag appeared. It read "Lying Merchant," written in emerald green text. Upon seeing the green tag, Sir Soren's attitude immediately softened considerably. He even took the longsword he had drawn, and resheathed it at his waist. Because even though Mills was just a merchant, since he had already advanced to a transcendent rank, then it was necessary for him to grant the other party due respect. This was an unspoken understanding among almost all transcendent beings. Sir Soren, with a cold demeanor, addressed Mills. "What evidence do you have to prove that the taxes paid by the villagers here are the coins that were stolen from you?" After hearing Sir Soren's questioning of Mills, you breathed a slight sigh of relief, and gestured to Berg with your eyes, to quickly hide in the crowd, to prevent his hunter tag from being seen. You could sense that this Sir Soren, who appeared cold and powerful, inwardly still favored the villagers of Golan village. Or rather, did not want to hand over the money that had been submitted as taxes. "Sir Knight, please check the taxes you have collected. Are they like this copper saw from me, marked with a subtle scratch on the back?" Mills then took a copper saw from his pocket and handed it to Sir Soren. He said with full confidence, "Every truly excellent clay merchant will mark their own coins with their unique identifier." Sir Soren took the copper saw and examined it carefully. Indeed, on the back of the copper coin, he found a nearly imperceptible, tiny scratch. Seeing this, his brows furrowed tightly. "Bring me the money pouch," Sir Soren commanded. His attendants quickly brought the previously collected money pouch from the carriage to the knight. Soren reached into the money pouch and grabbed a handful of coins. He examined them carefully. "This one has no scratch. This one also has a scratch. This one has no." A moment later, Sir Soren fell silent. Through his observation, more than half of the coins in the pouch had scratches on their backs consistent with the one provided by Mills' copper saw. This meant that these taxes most likely were indeed the money that the villagers of this village had taken from the other party. Deep down, he did not want more trouble in his territory, nor did he like this clay man named Mills, especially since his profession was the infamous lying merchant. Lying is a merchant's privilege, and not a knight's privilege. These taxes, indeed, are mostly the coins that were stolen from you. After a moment of silence, Sir Soren suddenly spoke. As soon as these words were uttered, the expressions of the surrounding villagers instantly turned anxious and uneasy. Some villagers wanted to speak up and clarify, saying that this was a noble prince His Highness bestowed upon them, but the surrounding villagers fiercely covered their mouths. Because before this, village chief Robert had already ordered that His Highness did not wish his identity to be revealed. Therefore, if anyone dared to reveal any information about His Highness, their entire family would be driven out of the village to wander. In this cruel world, to make a farmer wander was undoubtedly equivalent to a death sentence. And you, who had been observing this scene from the crowd, had truly almost stood up to kill. And you hadn't expected anyone to be so idle as to even mark a single copper coin. However, from the perspective of a shrewd merchant, this fellow was quite competent. "Ha! I told you these coins were mine, didn't I?" Mills laughed heartily. Then he eagerly stretched out both hands, wanting to take the coins from the money pouch. With a flash of light, the soul-locking knight drew his longsword and blocked Mills. "Your coins were stolen, then go find the person who stole your money and demand it back," the soul-locking knight calmly said. "These are the taxes I, as a knight, collected for my lord's army. If you dare to covet them, then be prepared to face my judgment." The soul-locking knight gently ran his finger along his longsword. The longsword's blade immediately let out a crisp hum. Feeling the undisguised cold, killing intent from the other party, Mills's face instantly turned very grim. He realized that, even if he proved the coins were his, he wouldn't be able to get them back, because they had already been handed over as taxes. So locking, as a knight, would never return the taxes to him, because that would compromise his duty. Damn it. Damn it. This bastard has no sense of honor at all. How am I supposed to make up for my losses now? Mills cursed frantically in his heart. How could these dirt-poor farmers have money to pay me back unless they sell? Thinking of this, a glint of golden light suddenly flashed in Mills's eyes. Farmers indeed had no money, but farmers were not necessarily worthless. Moreover, there weren't only farmers in this village. He vaguely remembered the malicious person who shot an arrow at him, the professional nurse above his head. Hunter Mills quickly scanned the surrounding crowd. His gaze, like a fishing net, swept over the anxious faces. And fortunately, Burger, under your eye signal, had already stooped down and hidden in the crowd. Therefore, Mills's search ended fruitlessly. Only farmers. Still farmers. Was that Hunter perhaps hired by them? Mills thought angrily. With Solon present, indeed. With him present, he couldn't sell all the villagers here to be slaves. But only taking a few farmers might not even be enough for the travel expenses to the city of slaves. Just then, the corner of his eye suddenly caught sight of a young maiden in the crowd, and then he couldn't tear his gaze away. He stared fixedly at the other person like a jackal. What a beautiful maiden, Mills couldn't help but exclaim in his heart. Her golden hair cascaded over her shoulders like a waterfall, every strand seemingly kissed by the sun, shimmering with a soft luster. Her deep, clear blue eyes, like a clear sky reflected on a lake, seemed to peer into people's hearts, yet were filled with purity and innocence. Although she was only wearing a very coarse linen outer garment, her slightly revealed snow-white skin and rose-petal-like delicate lips were still enough to make any man drool. What terrifying eyes! Sensing this scorching and sickening gaze, Anelia instinctively stepped back. But Mills continued to stare at her with an intensely fervent gaze, fixedly watching her. This wasn't because he had fallen in love at first sight with this maiden. It was purely because he felt he had found a gold mine. Golden hair, blue eyes, delicate features, snow-white skin, such a beautiful girl. As if blessed by the gods. If she were given even a little makeover and taken to the city of slaves to be sold, she could fetch at least 3 gold sol. If a noble lineage were fabricated for her background, and with a little bit of luck, she could even sell for 10 gold sol in one go. Thinking of this, Mills felt his entire body's blood boiling. He had a premonition. If he could pull off this business deal, his career might once again achieve a significant triumph. Even if he was just a lowly merchant, once he reached the 3rd rank, those lofty nobles on Morningstar Street who looked down on everyone would also need to maintain superficial harmony and treat him as an honored guest. Sir Knight, my lost money, consider it a gift from me to the great Lord Huslin as cash. In the name of Lord Huslin's benevolence, may I be permitted to take one person from this village that robbed me of my money and take one person as my slave. Mills spoke with a tremulous, yet clear, voice. Sir Thorin, who was about to leave, had a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He began to seriously consider the pros and cons of this choice. If he refused, there was no guarantee this merchant wouldn't blabber nonsense after leaving the territory and damage his reputation as the protagonist. If he agreed, there seemed to be no loss either. Anyway, farmers who couldn't pay taxes were supposed to be sold into slavery anyway. Now, it was just one less person for this village. It wouldn't affect next year's revenue. As for what these farmers thought, who cared? As a noble knight, Thorin felt he had already shown benevolence and respect to these farmers. All right, stranger, let's do as you say. But if you dare to spread any rumors after leaving my territory, you'll have to watch out for my sword. Sir Thorin patted the hilt of the sword at his waist. While agreeing to Mill's request, he didn't forget to threaten him. By the gods above, the great Lord Yuslin must be as rumored, a benevolent and generous lord. Otherwise, how could his knight be so noble? Hearing this, Mills was overjoyed. He cheered 3 times in a row. I want her as my slave. Mills quickly extended his finger and precisely pointed to the petite Anelia in the crowd. The girl's face instantly turned as white as paper. After all, for a teenage girl, there was nothing more terrifying than being sold to the city of slaves. Almost instinctively, the frightened Anelia looked in a certain direction within the crowd. There was the one to whom she had truly pledged her loyalty, and in the future would likely also offer her body, and even her soul to her master. Seeing the other person's inner turmoil, like a small beast, with panicked and pleading eyes, he slightly nodded and returned a reassuring look. Seeing this, Anelia's face gradually regained its color. She stood calmly in place, with no trace of fear left in her heart. She was someone who had someone to rely on, and her reliance was very strong. Sir Thorin no longer hesitated. After all, he still needed to rush to the next village to collect taxes. Merchant, you're getting a bargain. Take this beautiful girl and get out of here quickly. Remember what you just said, Sir Thorin said, waving his hand. May the gods bless you, generous Sir Knight. Hearing this, Mills was immediately overjoyed. He immediately ran towards Anelia. This scene instantly made all the surrounding villagers and Robert's hearts leap into their throats. If they allowed the most beautiful flower in the village to be taken away by an ugly clay person, then their entire, I will never forgive myself for the rest of my life. Come with me. Good girl. I will find you a noble master worthy of your beauty. Master, you will live a much happier life than now. Mills, reaching out his hand to grab Anelia's arm, spoke alluringly. Although he knew what kind of characters the nobles, his own kin, and wealthy merchants in the city of slaves were, this did not prevent him from painting a rosy picture first, lest the other party become so afraid that they would resist. Assistant Anelia already has a master. He is a noble and important figure. Just then, Berg rushed out from the crowd, blocking Mills's path, and shouted loudly. He absolutely could not tolerate this disgusting clay person touching his sister in any way. This was an insult to his sister, and also an insult to that highness. Seeing this scene, Mills did not flinch, but instead looked even more overjoyed. Because he had already recognized this youth with the hunter tag above his head. He was undoubtedly one of the 2 villains who robbed him a few days ago. Although far less valuable than that girl, if sold into slavery, he should be worth 2 or 3 May silver coins. Sir Knight Thorin, he is the villain who robbed me of my money. Please apprehend him for me. Mills said loudly. Knight Thorin frowned slightly. Although he really didn't want to get involved in Mills's affairs, as a knight, facing a robber appearing in his territory, he still had a duty to punish him. After all, if he dared to rob today, it was hard to guarantee whether he wouldn't rob the Lord tomorrow. Knight Thorin leaped off his horse and drew his longsword. The next moment, his body transformed into an afterimage, rushing towards Berg like a pouncing wolf. Berg quickly drew the small knife hidden in the secret pocket of his right pant leg, wanting to defend against the attack. But the knight's sword was too fast. The sword flashed with light and passed through. In just an instant, the small knife in Berg's hand was struck away. Seeing that the situation was about to get out of control, Yu immediately walked out from the crowd, with a calm expression. Let's call it a draw. I am the true villain. Even more so. Looking at the handsome young man walking out of the crowd, Mills's expression became even more joyful. He quickly used his excellent eyesight to assess the other party's value. Extremely rare black hair and black eyes, 3 gold Thorin coins. Fair and delicate skin, half a gold florin coin. Cold, noble, aristocratic temperament, half a gold florin coin. Handsome facial features, 1 gold florin coin. Linen clothes plus a comical large straw hat, deducting 1 silver florin coin. After the assessment, Mills gasped in a cold breath. He found that this young man's value in the city of slaves was even higher than that of the girl named Anelia earlier. Moreover, if he encountered those insatiable noblewomen, or lords with same-sex preferences who would take him as a close partner, then it was even possible to sell him for an unimaginable sky-high price. Sir Knight. Yes. He is the villain who robbed me of my money. Please. You must apprehend him. I want him to be my slave to compensate for my losses. Mills pointed at you and said ecstatically, if it weren't for too many people here, he would have rushed over and kissed the other party a few times. How could this be a villain? This was clearly his benefactor and the source of his advancement. Just as Mills finished speaking, the atmosphere around instantly became strange. All the surrounding villagers, including Anelia and Burke, who were about to be apprehended and sold into slavery, stared at Mills with a strange gaze. Many villagers even gaped in a daze, as if they had heard some kind of shocking fairy tale. And Thorin, who noticed the strange reactions of these villagers. The knight frowned slightly. He sized up the young man standing in front of the crowd. For some reason, he, who had served nobles for many years, he always felt that the other party's aura was a bit extraordinary. The young man was draped in a patched linen robe, but the lining beneath the robe seemed to be of very good material. And his facial skin was fair and delicate, not even a single blemish. For a commoner male, this was too rare. Besides this, the young man also wore a very large hat on his head, a comical straw hat that resembled a long, curved mushroom. As a hat, its practicality was very low. But if it were an item used to conceal identity and provide protection, then it could be understood. When recalling what Burke had said earlier about an incomparably noble highness, Knight Thorin's eyes narrowed slightly. Sir, could you please take off your hat? Knight Thorin said to you. His attitude was surprisingly good. He even used the honorific sir, because according to the laws of the kingdom of Socha, any visitor entering noble territory had an obligation to the knight guarding the territory to reveal their identity. Your household, Knight Thorin said lightly. He raised a finger, and several attendants behind him slowly approached you. It seems I have no other choice, you sighed softly. You knew that next, you would probably bid farewell to the peaceful life in this village, and truly step into this bizarre and fantastical fantasy world. Under everyone's gaze, you slowly took off your straw hat that closely resembled a large mushroom. A long string of white text emerged. At this moment, time seemed to fall silent. The villagers who had already seen it were fine, but Knight Thorin and his attendants were already stunned like puppets, mouths agape and motionless. Knight Thorin, who always prided himself on being quick and steady, even dropped the Vajra he regarded as his life, a Vajra he maintained several times a day, into the mud and forgot to pick it up. But the most exaggerated expression belonged to Mills. His face looked as if it had been struck by an invisible heavy hammer, with muscles from his eyebrows to his chin twitching uncontrollably. It was as if countless ants were crawling under his skin, convulsing wildly back and forth. His eyes were wide and round like light bulbs, and his mouth opened so wide it even dislocated, revealing the gold tooth embedded in his back molar. Heir to a kingdom of 1.4 billion citizens, Mills, read out the meaning of the text with a trembling voice. He finally understood why the villagers' gazes had been so strange, after he declared he would make you his slave. Empty string. Just as Mills read out that passage, Knight Thorin and his attendants, as if waking from a dream, quickly knelt down on one knee before you. I, Thorin Brooke, on behalf of Lord Hughes of Blackwell Forest, empty string, and on behalf of my liege, Xianxia, greet an incomparably noble prince, Your Highness, thank you for gracing Blackwolf Village with your presence. Knight Thorin's voice was sonorous and powerful. As he lowered his head sharply, the speed was so great that it even created a whooshing sound. On his forehead, cold sweat slightly seeped out due to nervousness. He had almost, in front of this Highness, boasted about his liege's greatness. His liege was indeed great, but in front of this incomparably noble Highness, it was likely that only the eternal gods could be crowned with greatness. You looked at the knight before you, who had been cold and arrogant earlier, but was now so respectful that he wished he could prostrate himself on the muddy ground. You secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The worst situation you had imagined was being directly exposed by the experienced and knowledgeable knight, and then killed on the spot. But now it seemed that people in this world seemed to have a very high degree of trust in the labels everyone was born with on their heads. Empty string. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say it was deeply ingrained. From this perspective, perhaps you could be a little bolder in the future. By the Supreme Creator above. Oh. Great, noble, and handsome Highness of this world, I beg you to forgive my impoliteness. I am willing to serve you like an ox or a horse for my entire life. Just then, finally, from the shock your identity and background had brought, Mills, who had come to his senses, crying with snot and tears, lunged towards you. Mills knew very well that after his brain had seemingly filled with water, and he had uttered such absurd and unreasonable words, the only way to survive was to cling to his Highness's leg, wailing and crying, swearing lifelong loyalty to seek forgiveness. If this succeeded, he might even be able to turn this, his life's greatest crisis to date, into a chance to change his destiny. Mills felt that he was still a capable man, at least in business. He was willing to swear to the Supreme Creator. If His Highness was willing to forgive him, he would certainly dedicate the rest of his life to loyally serving His Highness. Of course, the prerequisite was that after succeeding, His Highness would be willing to confer upon him a noble title. How dare you, seeing Mills' dirty hand about to touch your shoe tip, Sir Solon, who had been kneeling on one knee, finally couldn't hold back. The powerful physique brought by his position as an extraordinary knight allowed Sir Solon to cross a distance of over 10 meters in an instant, to rush behind Mills and subdue this greedy merchant, pinning him to the ground. Because as a knight, his act of maintaining public order was legitimate, so Mills' direct ability as a lying merchant, improper protection was not activated. Your Highness, do you need me to slay this insolent wretch who has offended you? Sir Solon, with one hand pressing down on the desperately struggling Mills, and with his other hand, took from a follower the adamantine longsword picked up from the ground. You said with surging killing intent. Wait a moment, Sir Knight. Before that, I believe it's necessary for me to first explain the entire matter's ins and outs to you. You calmly said. Your Highness, listening to your voice is my honor. I shall certainly listen with utmost respect. Like a clown performing a face-changing magic trick, the cold killing intent on Sir Solon's face was instantly replaced by an overflowing smile. Even the wrinkles on his face seemed to bloom brilliantly. A moment later, you recounted the entire matter's ins and outs, from beginning to end. So that's how it is. Sir Solon suddenly understood. He finally understood why this noble Highness would willingly stoop so low as to rob a merchant. It turned out that Mills, in order to make money, had not hesitated to violate a vow made in the name of a deity. Even for the Cray people, this was utterly deranged. Sir Solon's expression suddenly turned very grim. He seemed to understand why several villages this year couldn't pay their taxes, and it just so happened that they were all villages primarily known for fruit production. You scoundrel, you truly are a qualified Cray person. Sir Solon pressed down hard on Mills' neck. Solon Knight was firmly pressing Mills's neck. Gritting his teeth, he said, looking at the other's face, flushed red and swollen from restricted breathing. His heart boiled with murderous intent. If not for his consideration for the noble Highness before him, He would have already used his sword to carve several holes into Mill's body. Your Highness. Just give the order. Your Highness. As long as you give the order, I will immediately kill this person. I guarantee I won't let him die too easily. I promise I won't let him die too easily. Sullen Knight, trembling, begged, please spare me. And to Gold Souls, Mills pleaded indistinctly. You smiled slightly. Sir Knight, in my homeland, there is an ancient saying, repay kindness with kindness. Repay grievances with straightforwardness. Since Mills did not intend to take my life, then I will not take his life either, you said softly. As soon as these words were spoken, Mills was instantly overjoyed. And Sullen Knight slightly frowned, thinking, this your highness seems a bit too kind. If it were his liege, he would have found him and made several bloody holes with a sword. Therefore, please help me send him to the city of slaves. The smile on Mills's face instantly froze. And in Sullen Knight's eyes as he looked at you, there was an added trace of awe. No matter when, no matter what status, the powerful person from the revenge hospital are most able to gain the awe of those around them, even if it stems from fear. No, I don't want to be sold as a slave. Kill me. Please kill me. Nils cried and wailed. Once, in order to make money, and had investigated the market of the city of slaves, naturally knew what kind of painful lives the slaves there lived. To say it was hell would not be an exaggeration, especially after visiting the collection of a certain slave trader of his own race. Afterward, he, who had always been bold, was so disgusted that he vomited for several days after returning home, unable to eat anything. His wailing sounded so miserable. However, the crowd gathered here were all villagers he had harmed to the point of almost having their families broken up. Therefore, no matter how miserable his pleas were, what he received was still only the villagers' eyes full of hatred. Some even threw rotten red fruits at him. Under the watchful eyes of all, Mills was tied up hand and foot. A rag was stuffed into his mouth, and he was thrown onto the carriage. Respected Your Highness, please also inform me of your esteemed name. It won't be long. My liege, Viscount Hughes, will come to personally pay his respects to you. After everything was handled, Sullen Knight, with his attendant Mendanxi, knelt before you, said respectfully. You calmly said, May the gods protect His Highness Ni Mingyu. Sullen Knight's expression was pious. After drawing a circle on the wolf head on his breastplate, only then did he stand up, mount his horse with his attendants, and leave. Clip-CLOP-CLOP. The afterglow of the setting sun, accompanied by a flurry of urgent hoofbeats. The knight's figure gradually disappeared into the distance. Meanwhile, the village side erupted in excitement. Your Highness, may the gods protect you. Your Highness, thank you for your kindness. Please, you must accept the wreath I wove for you. Your Highness, thank you for punishing that damned clay man. Sadly, my husband at the time, because he was deceived, became so angry he lost his mind, fell to his death while picking red fruits. Thank you. The villagers, who had overcome the tax crisis, gathered around, enthusiastically cheered and expressed gratitude. You damn bastard. Get over here. Just then, Village Chief Robert's roar startled everyone like a clap of thunder. He glared angrily at Boj. His expression was terrifyingly fierce. On his head, his frost-white hair seemed about to explode. Boj had never seen the village chief look so angry. So, he immediately trotted over to Robert. "Bastard! How dare you leak His Highness's information? Have you forgotten the agreement between the village and His Highness?" Robert slapped Boj hard across the face. The boy's slightly immature face instantly became red and swollen. "I just didn't want that clay man's dirty hands to touch Xianxia. Moreover, this was also to protect His Highness." Boj, covering his flushed face, said helplessly, still dared to talk back. However, this made Robert even angrier. He, unappreciative, slapped him again, hitting Boj hard on the face. The struck area immediately became red as well. Now it was symmetrical. But Robert still didn't stop his attack. Instead, he wildly swung his fists, hitting Boj's body like a fierce storm, facing the benefactor who raised him. And also, he felt that he himself had made a serious mistake. Boj dared not resist at all. He curled up on the ground with his hands covering his head, silently enduring Robert's beating. The villagers all watched this scene in horror. It was the first time they had seen their usually kind village chief look so furious. However, even though they were worried about Berg, the villagers still remained silent. They only silently watched, with worried eyes, Berg, who had been beaten until his mouth was bleeding, and his whole body was covered in bruises. Anelia was the same. The girl even cruelly turned her head away, and covered her ears with both hands, pretending not to hear or see. "You scoundrel! Have you forgotten His Highness's kindness to us?" Robert still wanted to continue hitting him, but a hand gently pressed on his shoulder. He turned his head and saw you standing in front of him, expressionless. "Your Highness." The anger on Robert's face instantly vanished into thin air. He bowed down with a face full of smiles and knelt. "You get over here and apologize to His Highness." At the same time, Robert didn't forget to scold Berg. Berg struggled to stand up, and limped to stand before you. He knelt on one knee. He looked very miserable now. His cheeks were red and swollen, and dried blood still clung to the corners of his mouth. His eyes were almost narrowed into slits. His arms and legs were covered in purplish bruises. "Your Highness, I have disobeyed your instructions. Please punish me." Berg hung his head low, his voice as heavy as if it were burdened by a great mountain. No matter the reason, he had disobeyed His Highness's instructions. This was an unchangeable fact. And you remained expressionless, only slightly frowning, as if contemplating something. "Your Highness, I will expel Berg from the village, to punish him for his offense against you." Robert also spoke up. There was a hint of reluctance in his eyes, but his expression remained firm. Although he had always regarded Berg as his own son, now, this son had committed a grave mistake in the village. Even he, as the village chief, would never bend the law. Hearing this, Berg's eyes felt a little sore. Although he had already decided to leave the village soon, to embark on a quest for extraordinary methods, and realize his dream of becoming a strong one, actively leaving and being expelled were two different concepts. The former meant he still had a home, while the latter meant he could never return. He would only be able to wander outside like a stray dog, and no one would remember him until his soul returned to the earth. Just as Berg felt his eyes gradually filling with warm tears, a familiar voice awakened him, telling him to look up. Berg slowly raised his head, only to see you looking at him with a calm expression. Berg was stunned for a moment, his gaze wavering, not daring to meet His Highness's eyes directly. He had failed to live up to His Highness's expectations. But unexpectedly, His Highness did not scold him. Instead, you took out a snow-white handkerchief from your clothes pocket and gently wiped the blood and dirt from his face. Berg was somewhat overwhelmed by the unexpected favor, wanting to dodge away, but you firmly held his shoulder. So he could only accept with profound gratitude this kindness from His Highness. Even when the handkerchief occasionally touched his wounds, causing a sharp pain, he gritted his teeth, forcing himself not to make any sound. Even though he was about to leave soon, even at this last moment, he hoped to leave a good impression on this kind and benevolent Highness, with whom he had briefly interacted. At least he couldn't show such a weak demeanor, so that many years later, on a quiet afternoon, perhaps His Highness would occasionally remember an ordinary hunter who had saved him when a pack of wolves attacked. This was his honor. You have violated the agreement between the village and me. Logically, I should punish you, you said calmly. But you once saved my life. Logically, I should forgive your current mistake. I am a stingy person. Therefore, I still decide to punish you. Upon hearing this, Berg's face, which had just brightened, it gradually dimmed again. I want to punish you by making you my attendant from now on, to serve me for a lifetime. As soon as these words were spoken, the surrounding villagers and Robert Berg's expression changed. Your Highness, I didn't hear clearly just now. Could you say it again? Berg suspected his ears were playing tricks on him. Otherwise, how could he have heard such wonderful words? I have decided to punish you by making you my attendant to serve me for a lifetime. Are you repeating yourself out of helplessness? If you are unwilling, I can also choose a different punishment. You shrugged and casually threw away the dirty tissue in your hand. It was something he had kept in his pocket since before he transmigrated. Most of it had been used to satisfy his physiological needs these past few days. Only this last piece remained. Willing. I'm willing. Berg was overjoyed and quickly stood up, only to feel the injuries from being beaten suddenly no longer hurt. The young man took a deep breath, adjusting his mood. His rough hands, calloused and weathered, clenched tightly into fists. His knuckles were slightly white from the exertion. On his sharply defined face, there were still tear stains and swollen injuries that had not dried. But his gaze became even more determined. In his hazel eyes, it was as if a blazing flame was burning. Under the expectant and blessed gazes of all the villagers, Berg slowly knelt on one knee and declared loudly, Creator above, gods above, I, Berg, will wait. Just then, you suddenly interrupted him. Hearing this, Berg's eyes became somewhat nervous. He was afraid that your Highness would change his mind. If that happened, he would be worse off than dead. Before you make your oath, I have decided to grant you a surname first. The policy states that, to the best of your knowledge, in the Middle Ages, many nobles, when accepting the loyalty of others, would grant them a surname to deepen the bond between the two parties. He had already exposed the noble oath of this world. Therefore, he had to grasp every card in his hand. Berg was his first card. In my homeland, there is a dragon slayer of immense power and unparalleled inner fortitude. I have decided to bestow his surname upon you. I hope that one day you can be as reliable as him. From now on, your name will be Berg Chu. Slowly. In the next moment, Berg's face turned as red as if it were filled with blood, and the surrounding villagers all looked at him with extreme envy, staring intently at him. To be granted a surname by the prince of a superpower. What immense honor this was for a commoner. Even in their dreams, they would not dare to imagine such a thing. Berg was slapped hard. This time, the person who struck was none other than himself. Because reality was too beautiful, he doubted if this was a pleasant dream he was having in the afternoon. But the sharp pain in his face told him this was indeed reality. This incomparably noble Highness was truly willing to take him as his attendant, and even bestowed a surname upon him. Berg could only be grateful that he had hunted in the forest that day, and when he saw someone being ambushed, his sudden act of kindness had led to an exceptionally brilliant performance, resulting in this dreamlike encounter. After calming down, Berg steadied his emotions and declared loudly again, Creator above, gods above, I, Berg Chu, hereby swear, From this day forward, I will regard the prince below as my lord, and I will be his loyal attendant, his hunting dog. Whether the path ahead is thorny or ablaze, I will follow his footsteps. My life, my arrows, my soul will protect his honor and dignity until the end of my life. Berg's voice grew louder and louder, even carrying a sense of almost fanatical anticipation. I swear. No matter what enemy I face. I swear. No matter what kind of enemy I face. No matter what kind of predicament I encounter, I will stand by your side. With my flesh and blood body. Block all blades and swords for you. Your enemies are my enemies. Your ideals are my ideals. No matter if your demands are just or unjust, reasonable or unreasonable, I will surely do everything in my power to fulfill them for you. If I violate this oath, may the god of the sun scorch my body. May the god of thunder strike my soul. May the god of earth split open the earth and swallow my resting place. Boj's voice trembled slightly. He slowly bowed his head, his forehead almost touching the ground. His voice was low but increasingly clear. Your Highness Mingyu, please accept my allegiance. I accept your allegiance. And I believe your oath. I promise that from now on, I will protect your safety and illuminate your path as a strong one. You said softly. You used your hand on Boj's shoulder, patted him heavily twice. The path of the strong. My liege still remembers my words from my first pledge of allegiance. Boj's heart felt warm. He slowly stood up. His eyes were shining brightly, just as he wanted to thank his liege again for his generosity. He saw a white light suddenly appear above the other party's head. In a kingdom of 1.4 billion citizens, behind the long label of air, another new label gradually condensed. My liege, your profession has successfully condensed. Boj was surprised that he didn't need to say it. You had already felt the changes in your body. Your body seemed to become lighter, and waves of coolness came from your mind. Your whole body felt as comfortable as soaking in an outdoor hot spring. Boj, I'm going back first. You, who originally wanted to lecture Boj a few more words, hurriedly ran towards the wooden house, already impatient to see what his profession was and what abilities it brought, because that would directly determine his future in this fantasy world journey. Whether it would be a hard mode or a paradise mode. If he was lucky and got a transmigrator, or a profession with heaven-defying abilities like Fool, then he could just operate with his feet from then on. After you left, unable to contain their excitement any longer, the excited villagers surrounded Boj. Good lad. You're truly favored by the gods. Even after making a mistake, you were taken as an attendant by His Highness, and even gained a surname. It's even more incredible than the poems sung by bards. Incredible. Don't forget our village when you make it big later. Remember to come back often to visit. You must never forget His Highness's kindness. If you ever dare to betray His Highness in the future, don't blame me for not acknowledging you as a brother then. The villagers chattered around Boj. Some even lifted Boj high up. At this moment, Robert slowly walked towards Boj. Seeing this, the villagers all made way for him. Does it still hurt? Robert looked at Boj, who was covered in injuries. Sighed softly. Doesn't hurt. Not at all, Boj grinned. On his scarred face, a brilliant smile appeared. Although his body hurt, but the boundless joy it brought spiritually, this pain had long been drowned out. Robert's eyebrows furrowed at the sight of him. Do you hate me for hitting you like that just now? No, Uncle Robert. Without this beating from you, my lord might not even accept me. I'm too grateful to you." Borg couldn't help but burst into laughter. "You're so unseemly." Robert glared fiercely at Borg. Only then did the other party give a few dry coughs, and resumed his usual cold and calm demeanor. "Borg, you must remember, from now on, no matter what, even if there's any reason, never again disobey your lord's orders. In the future, if His Highness hits you, no matter how hard, you must not dodge. Just like how I hit you today. If anyone dares to insult His Highness, you must be the first to step forward and kill them." After giving many instructions, Robert looked at Borg, who still had a resolute expression, with no trace of annoyance on his face. Only then did he nod in satisfaction. Meanwhile, inside the wooden house, you stared blankly at your reflection in the water tank, with a bewildered expression. He never in his wildest dreams imagined that the profession he obtained would be from the reflection in this water tank. After the white text there to 1 point for billion citizens. After this line of white text, another line of white text appeared. University student. Although a profession is a summary of one's past life, this profession is surely too abstract. Isn't it? Your mouth twitched. You didn't actually care about what profession it was. What he cared about was what kind of wonderful abilities this profession could bring him. Marvelous ability, and preferably something like a knight or hunter. Abilities that aid in combat. University student, the moment he thought of his average physical test score before transmigration, he felt an impulse to dive headfirst into the water tank. Never mind. Let's check the abilities first. You sighed, and focused your gaze on the university student tag. Gradually, two more lines of text emerged below the tag, pure and naive. Upon first meeting, you will more easily gain others' favor. Mind wander. Detachment, you can empty your mind, allowing your body to take over actions. Can a mortal level profession also have two abilities? At the same time. On the other side, Knight Thorenbrook, after weighing the pros and cons, decided to temporarily abandon the tax collection mission and hand over the clay people from merchant mills to Xianxia. After ordering Xianxia to send him to the city of slaves, Knight Thorin then rode his swift horse, galloping non-stop towards the castle where his lord resided. After several perfect hours rushed on their way, Knight Thorin finally, at the moment the moonlight was brightest, arrived at Black Wolf Keep, the heart of Black Wolf Ridge. "Uncle Sean, please immediately arrange for me to see the Lord. I have vital intelligence to report." Knight Thorin leaped off his horse and shouted impatiently at the castle's butler. Having lived for 60 years, the old butler, who had personally watched Thorin grow from a youth into a middle-aged man, was seeing for the first time the other party looking so anxious. So, he quickly summoned a maid to wake the lord who had already retired for the night. A moment later, in the castle's great hall, from the high ceiling, hung a massive iron chandelier. Candles filled the lamp, emitting a soft glow that illuminated the gloom. On the walls on both sides, hung swords or shields were visible everywhere, symbolizing the lord's extraordinary martial prowess. And above the main seat in the center, hung a large banner with a black wolf's head. That was the emblem of the Hughes family. Knight Thorin stood quietly on the wolfskin rug below the main seat, awaiting the arrival of his lord. There were also two graceful and charming maids attending by the main seat. Not long after, a mature young man, appearing to be in his early 30s, stepped into the hall. His facial features were sharp and profound, and a pair of melancholic green eyes sparkled with spirit. He wore a neatly trimmed beard, and looked like a polite gentleman. However, his physique was exceptionally tall, over 1.9 meters, with broad shoulders and thick arms. One could tell at a glance that he was a seasoned warrior. The only minor flaw was that he wasn't wearing luxurious black clothes, nor sturdy armor, but a loose, red nightgown. "My lord, I am very sorry to disturb your sleep." Upon seeing the newcomer, Knight Thorin immediately knelt on one knee without hesitation, His proud head bowed deeply. "It is my fault for meeting you in my nightgown. This is also my discourtesy as the Lord." "We are even," said the Lord of Blackwolf Ridge, the renowned Howling Wolf, Kalen Hughes. Kalen stretched leisurely and sat unceremoniously on the main seat. He took the black tea offered by a maid and took a small sip. Then his gaze directed at Thorin below. "By my reckoning, you should not have finished your tax collection duties yet. Have you?" Kalen asked in a deep voice. "It is because the intelligence is too vital that I took the liberty to temporarily abandon the tax collection mission you assigned," Thorin said respectfully, raising his head. Kalen's gaze gradually deepened. He took another sip of black tea. He couldn't imagine what kind of intelligence it could be that would make Thorin abandon tax collection, rush here overnight, and even dare to disturb his sleep, just to report in time. Could it be that there's another war in the kingdom? If so, that would truly be undesirable. His beloved son has just been born. After all, in Golan village, I encountered a noble, His Highness. His identity, his household registration, is heir to 1.4 billion citizens of the kingdom. Bang! The sound of a teacup shattering suddenly rang out. In the great hall of Blackwolf Keep, the exquisite ceramic teacup slipped from Kalen's hand, and at the moment it hit the hard floor, it shattered into countless pieces. Hot black tea splashed all over Kalen. However, this nobleman completely ignored it. His mind, still immersed in the information the knight had just reported. "Say that again." "Heir to how many citizens of the kingdom?" Kalen abruptly stood up from the main seat. His stern face was filled with utter astonishment. Gone was his previous calm and composed demeanor. "My lord, the identity displayed above that prince's head is 1.4 billion citizens," Knight Thorin respectfully stated. As for Kalen, Thorin was not at all surprised by his lord's sudden smashing of the teacup. In fact, he even thought his lord was already very calm. If it were him, he would have surely been so shocked that he'd fall off his chair. "Are you sure you didn't misread it?" Kalen asked, full of doubt. "It could be 14 million, or 140 million, but no matter what, it shouldn't be 1.4 billion, because the three main human nations on the continent today, the Kingdom of Xianxia, which reveres the sun and wind, the Kingdom of Milan, which believes in thunder, rain, and earth, and the Kingdom of Rhine, which advocates the sun and moon, these three kingdoms, plus all their vassal states, free people, serfs, slaves, and so on, even all of them combined, certainly do not amount to the terrifying number of 1.4 billion. Kalen found it hard to imagine if there truly was a country with 1.4 billion people, how vast its territory would be, how high its grain yield, and how astonishing its national power would be. "My lord, when I was in the presence of that prince, I secretly counted several times. It was indeed a 10-digit number," Knight Thorin said with a wry smile. Kalen's expression gradually grew solemn. It was as if a dark cloud hung over his face. Even in the past, during the war to suppress the rebellion in the Duchy of Mason, when he was alone, surrounded by several enemy extraordinary knights, his expression had never been this solemn. He knew very well that although his knight was not highly educated, haven't read many books, but at least I can count well enough. This also means that the identity and household registration of that highness are indeed real. But is what is seen with the eyes truly real? Or is there a possibility of illusion or some kind of magic? Although Colin, in his past experience, had never heard of magic that could modify and reinforce something, but this doesn't mean such a possibility doesn't exist. Colin sat back in his main seat. His fingers unconsciously tapped the rhythm on the chair, slow and heavy, as if calculating something. The next day, the thin mist on the outskirts of Wolf Howl Forest slightly dispersed. The morning light was cut by layers of branches and leaves into tiny golden flakes, scattered on the damp moss and fallen leaves. An earthy raw smell wafted through the air. A gray wild rabbit was quietly squatting on the grass, nibbling on the tender green grass at its feet. Its ear flaps suddenly turned to the left, then suddenly to the right. Its moist nose twitched slightly in the air, until it confirmed that all round there was only the rustling of wind through the treetops, before lowering its head again. Swoosh! Accompanied by the sound of a bowstring vibrating, an arrow shot out fiercely from the bushes like a venomous snake. The sharp arrow had sliced through the air, emitting a faint whistling sound. The wild rabbit, hearing the sound, evidently sensed danger. Its ears shot up, its body leaning slightly back, wanting to leap and escape. However, the arrow's speed was simply too fast. Its hind legs had just pushed off when the arrow pierced its brain with precision. It penetrated from the back of its head, bringing out a string of glistening blood beads. Thud! The wild rabbit fell to the ground. After twitching for a moment, it lay motionless. At this moment, two figures emerged from the bushes. One was a tall, handsome black-haired youth, the other a stern-faced, thin-faced brown-haired boy. Soon, seeing on the grass the wild rabbit's headshot corpse, the sternness on the brown-haired boy's face was instantly replaced by a look of profound admiration. "My lord, could it be that you have received the blessing of the storm and hunting god?" Burke asked, deeply shaken. As a hunter, he naturally understood how difficult it was to train an archer. It not only required extraordinary eyesight and mental fortitude, but also countless repetitions of tedious practice. Even he, if it weren't for his father having laid the foundation for him since childhood, would find it hard to possess such precise archery skills now. Let alone the Lord who had just shot such a divine arrow. The Lord, in just one day, had undergone such an earth-shattering transformation. It was as if he had become a different person. "I just got a little more serious, you," holding the bow and arrow, said, your gaze gradually clearing, faintly. Although Burke was already his attendant, he had no intention of telling the other party about his abilities. After all, he understood the principle that loose lips sink ships. He still understood that. Thump! 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 Just then, another wild rabbit emerged from the grass, darting rapidly towards the bushes ahead. Wandering beyond the mist activated. You took an arrow from the quiver on Burke's back, skillfully drew the bow and knocked an arrow, and with a sudden burst of strength in your arm, shot it out fiercely. Your movements were fluid and graceful, without a hint of excess or stiffness. Swish! The arrow precisely embedded itself in the running wild rabbit's right eye, and exited from its left eye, bringing out a string of blood. A perfect kill. Many times, perhaps consciousness is merely a burden to the body. You, having recovered your senses, looked at the wild rabbit's corpse on the ground, and silently sighed in your heart. Meanwhile, Burke, who had witnessed the entire process, was so astonished that he simply froze, dumbfounded. The archery skills he had trained day and night for over a decade, his lord, had actually caught up to in just one day. Burke suddenly felt utterly useless. "My lord, am I very useless?" On the way back to the village, Burke, carrying two wild rabbit corpses, said gloomily, "You are my loyal attendant, and my most precious asset. Believe in yourself." You smiled slightly, and patted the boy's back, encouraging him. "I was just showing off a little. I certainly don't want my great warrior to lose his fighting spirit. Oh, my lord, I will definitely not let down the surname you bestowed upon me. One day, I will become a dragon hunter like the sir, from your hometown." Sir Chu, the boy, who had never suffered such a setback, immediately regained his fighting spirit. "Indeed, I believe in you." The two gradually disappeared into the thin mist of the forest. At the entrance of Guolan village, "Your Highness, on behalf of my liege, Viscount Colin Hughes, extend my greetings to you." As soon as you arrived here, you saw Sir Thorin, who had previously come to collect taxes. The knight respectfully knelt on one knee before him. This scene made your heart a little nervous, but on the surface, he still pretended to be calm and composed, asking in an indifferent voice, "What brings you here? My liege has already heard of your arrival. He feels greatly honored by your presence, and therefore intends to, at dusk today, personally come to pay his respects to you. He hopes you will agree." Sir Thorin bowed respectfully, his weathered face filled with anticipation. As soon as these words were spoken, your heart immediately began to pound rapidly. You knew that noble, who belonged to the kingdom's ruling class, was definitely not as easy to deceive as the villagers of Guolan village and the knights. The slightest mistake, and he might face the risk of being exposed and bleeding on the spot. I also look forward to meeting your liege. Although extremely nervous internally, you still calmly agreed. Through the experiences of these days since crossing over, you had already understood that simply avoiding would not improve your situation. Instead, bold initiative was the only way to find a breakthrough. Of course, you were well aware of the main reason, although that Lord in Sir Thorin's message sounded very polite. In the end, it was merely courtesy before force. Coming to pay respects to you was giving you face. If you didn't agree, the next time, it wouldn't be Sir Thorin alone, but a troop of brave and skilled warriors, ready to slaughter. Your Highness, thank you for your grace. My liege will not be disappointed in the slightest. Hearing this, Sir Thorin was overjoyed. He slowly stood up, and after bowing deeply, quickly leaped onto a tall horse nearby, and galloped towards where Viscount Hughes was temporarily staying. Without delay, he was already impatient to inform his liege of this good news. My lord, you are truly amazing. Even Viscount Hughes is coming to pay his respects to you. Bert couldn't help but exclaim in praise. You see, for everyone in the village, Viscount Hughes was a great figure, like a divine dragon whose head is seen but not its tail. The Black Wolf territory and several surrounding territories were all under Viscount Hughes's rule and benevolence. Some say that the taxes he levied in his territory were the lowest in the entire kingdom of Socha. Some say he was brave and skilled in battle, once fighting against many in a war, and managed to slay several of the enemy knights, earning him the good name of Fierce Wolf. But even such a great figure was personally coming with a gift to visit his lord. What an honor this was! Burke only felt that becoming His Highness's attendant was the happiest thing in his life, enough to offset all the hardships he had ever encountered. He looked at his lord with extremely loyal eyes. Feeling the burning gaze of the boy beside him, you thought with a bitter smile in your heart. At noon, the sunlight, like a dull knife, barely penetrated the dense canopy, and below, a winding path cut through the dense forest, leading straight into the distance. That was the only way to Guolan village. A carriage was parked by the side of the road. Its body was meticulously carved from high-quality wood, smooth as a mirror, reflecting the faint golden light of the setting sun. The carriage roof was covered with soft purple velvet drapes, with intricate silver thread embroidery along the edges. And pulling the carriage, they were also two black steeds with glossy, shining fur. Viscount Karen Hughes was lying in the front of this carriage, utterly bored. She was throwing things into the air. The red flame in his hand fell. He caught it. This was repeated. At this moment, he was wearing a well-tailored black suit, and he was wearing an exquisite silver tie. If one disregarded his overly broad shoulders and casual animals, he truly resembled a noble gentleman. And near the carriage, there were also several mounted guards, who were vigilantly observing the surrounding environment to protect their own safety. Of course, they knew very well this was just for show. After all, everyone knew that the Lord was truly the strongest in the entire domain. Just then, a burst of rapid hoofbeats came from afar. The guards instantly and vigilantly raised their long spears, Only after seeing the identity of the newcomer did he lower his guard. "Lord, Sir Thorin, the knight, has returned." The guards reported that he finally arrived. "This tie is almost strangling me to death." Upon hearing this, Kalen was overjoyed. He bit the red fruit in his hand, crushing it. He swallowed it directly, without even spitting out the pit. "That Highness from the Fifth Army has already agreed to your meeting request on the appointed day, with complete approval." Knight Thorin, who had ridden in, quickly dismounted. Did they agree so readily and respectfully? It seems the probability of it being true has increased significantly. Kalen was deep in thought. The appointed day is also fast approaching. "Prepare yourselves, we'll depart immediately." Kalen interlaced his fingers and stretched his back vigorously. Then he jumped from the front of the carriage to the ground. This ostentatious carriage was not something he prepared for himself, but rather his wife, Denise, brought it as part of her dowry from the Martha family. If that Highness's identity is indeed real, then this luxurious carriage was the one that brought him from the village to Langhao Castle. A simple conveyance. After all, to have an heir of a superpower, constantly residing in a dilapidated village within his own territory, would sound terrible if word got out. Even he, who never valued noble etiquette, felt that he truly deserved to be expelled and kneel in a well. Of course, all of this is based on the premise that the other party is truly the first person in hundreds of years to return from the Eastern continent, and their identity is, most likely, that of the heir to the super kingdom that rules the entire Eastern continent. If it's false, Kalen's eyes gradually grew dangerous. A cold aura emanated from him. The surrounding soldiers only felt a tingling sensation on their scalps. Then he can only be made to experience the pain of watching himself being devoured by a pack of wolves. Piece by piece, Kalen took a deep breath. Immediately after, a sound resembling a wolf's howl emerged from his mouth. A moment later, a sharp and powerful wolf howl came from the distant dense forest to the right of the road, accompanied by a series of crisp sounds of breaking branches and the heavy breathing of some large creature. A colossal creature slowly emerged from the dark, dense forest, entering everyone's field of vision. It was a fierce black wolf, over 2 meters tall at the shoulder and 5 to 6 meters long. The alpha wolf that once pounced on you was not even half its size. Its body was muscular, and its dark, black fur, under the dim light, gleamed with a fierce, cold luster. One could imagine how terrifying it would be when it hunted, moving through the dense forest. And in its fang maw, it was still tightly clenching the corpse of another gray wild wolf. Foul-smelling blood was splattered all over the ground. The size of that wild wolf was clearly a fist larger than an ordinary wild wolf, but in front of this giant wolf, it had completely become mere food for a gluttonous appetite. For some reason, facing this ferocious beast whose intimidating aura assailed them, the guards and Thorin, the knight, showed no panic whatsoever. "Humble one, didn't I tell you to just go relax in the dense forest, not to hunt?" Kalen said, frowning. "We're going to meet an important person. You know, if you dirty their eyes, just wait to be severely punished by me." This giant beast was precisely his mount as a knight, the Black Abyss Wolf, ruler of the Howling Wolf Forest. It was precisely by relying on this magical beast mount that he was able to fight against many, slay multiple extraordinary knights, and achieve great feats, earning him the title of Lang of Behu. Sensing the displeasure in his master's tone, Blacktail bit off and crushed the head of the wolf it held in its mouth. Then it began to gulp down and chew loudly. Chomp. Chomp. Accompanied by a series of unsettling chewing sounds. Soon that wolf's carcass, then only a dry, shriveled piece of skin remained. Immediately after, Blacktail began licking itself like a domestic cat, until there were no more blood stains on its massive body. It then wagged its tail and came before Kalen. It ingratiatingly stuck out its tongue. You're clearly a wolf. How can you act like a dog? Seeing his companion's ingratiating manner, Kalen's anger instantly dissipated. He shrugged helplessly. Blacktail continued wagging its tail as if it hadn't heard. In the deep green wolf's eyes, a human-like glint flashed. Is being a wolf so great? Exposed to wind and sun. No one to care for you when you're sick. How can that compare to being a dog? Living in a castle every day. And having dedicated servants attend to you. Let's go. Kalen leaped up onto Black Abyss Wolf's back. Then the group headed towards Gulen village. As the day progressed, the sunlight was no longer as scorching as at midday, but had become soft. The golden sunlight, like melted honey, flowed down from the azure sky, dyeing the fields a golden yellow. The distant emerald fruit forest swayed gently in the breeze, like a watercolor painting soaked in water. Kalen and his group arrived at the entrance of Gulen village on time. For nobles, being late is impolite, but arriving too early for an audience is also impolite. Welcome, Viscount Hughes. A maiden in a blue dress lifted her skirt and bowed slightly. Looking at the beautiful maiden before him, who in the sunlight seemed like a divine, sculpted beauty, a maiden, a trace of astonishment couldn't help but flash in Kalen's eyes. Although he was accustomed to seeing beautiful women, even his wife, Danielle, was herself a renowned beauty in the southern part of the kingdom. But the girl before him was so exquisite that she possessed an otherworldly beauty. Even Danielle was slightly inferior by 3 points. However, soon, Kalen's gaze gradually calmed. The maiden's expression was calm, as if the one before her was not the lord who commanded the entire territory, holding the power of life and death over all its people, but merely an ordinary guest paying a visit. I am Her Highness's maid, Anelia. My mistress is already waiting for you. Please proceed to meet her at once. To have such a beautiful maid at the village entrance, it seems Her Highness also has a deep understanding of aesthetics, Kalen remarked. Then, controlling Black Abyss Wolf, he prepared to enter the village. Although he had not yet met Her Highness, he already had a faint 3/10 of belief in his heart. After all, the maid's appearance could, in some ways, reflect the noble's status. Perhaps this beautiful maid before him came with Her Highness from the Eastern continent. Wait. Hold on. Just as Kalen was about to enter the village, Anelia stopped him. Her snow-white, slender arm fearlessly blocked Black Abyss Wolf's formidable maw. She didn't think at all that this giant beast, if it were to get slightly angry, could tear her to shreds. Her Highness only permits you to enter alone. Please dismount and leave your wolf, Anelia stated calmly. Hearing this, Kalen's brows furrowed tightly. If it were just not allowing Soren, the knights and guards, to enter, that would be fine, as they would be a burden if a real fight broke out. Empty string. As the previous line already completed the thought, Blacktail is different. A knight without a mount has significantly reduced combat effectiveness. Moreover, Blacktail, as a magical beast, is a great asset in itself. My mount has a very good temperament, and will not disturb Her Highness, Kalen said in a deep voice. His voice faintly carried a hint of cold displeasure. He patted the wolf's head beneath him. Black Abyss Wolf. Then it very spiritedly wagged its large black tail. To display one's own, I apologize. This is His Highness's command. If you insist on refusing, then please leave. Ignoring the hidden coldness in the Lord's voice, Anelia, with a voice like a clear spring, spoke word by word in a pleasant tone. At the same time, she raised her arm, making a gesture for him to leave. Kalen fell silent. His deep green eyes stared intently at the sentry, attempting to exert mental pressure on her. And the black vengeful wolf beneath him also instantly seemed to grow old, glaring fiercely at Amelia, and slightly baring its sharp fangs. However, facing this extremely oppressive scene, a scene enough to make ordinary people panic and flee, the girl's will did not waver in the slightest. She still maintained her previous gesture for him to leave. After 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and a minute passed, Kalen gave in. He lightly sighed. He leaped down from the back of the Black Abyss Wolf. He had originally thought to also use the Black Abyss Wolf as a means of verifying the other party's identity. After all, if the other party was truly a prince from a kingdom that unified the entire eastern continent, even if not skilled in combat, he would certainly be accustomed to magical beasts of the Black Abyss Wolf's caliber, taking them for granted. Therefore, he would definitely not show any surprise when seeing a Black Abyss Wolf, revealing any surprise. Conversely, it would indicate the falsity of his identity. But now it seems, this means of verification is no longer necessary. After all, even one of her maids treats the Black Abyss Wolf as if it were nothing. Why should he make a fool of himself? You. Beware. You just need to proceed straight ahead. His Highness is waiting for a doctor under the oak tree in the center of the village. Seeing Kalen give up on riding the Black Abyss Wolf into the village, Amelia then withdrew her arm that was blocking the way. You are an excellent maid. As he passed Amelia, Kalen said indifferently. Because I have an excellent master, the girl replied without turning her head. The sun slanted down onto the ground. An old oak tree, thick enough for several people to embrace. A weathered old oak tree stood majestically, its thick branches and dense canopy as if it were a giant, shielding from the scorching sun. And under the shade of the tree, there was a stone table and 2 wooden chairs. On one of the wooden chairs, a young man of about 20 years old was already seated. This was the scene Kalen saw after entering the village and proceeding for a distance. The scene he saw. Of course, his attention at this moment was not wasted on these sights, but was entirely focused on that young man, and the long string of white text above his head. Heir to a kingdom of 1.4 billion citizens, Kalen couldn't help but read it aloud. Afterwards, he was completely stunned. Although he had already heard about his affairs from the Lord of the Knights, but after all, seeing it with his own eyes and hearing about it were 2 different concepts. What's more, the other party's outrageous identity and household was actually exactly as described, word for word. No. It could also be some kind of illusion. Calm down. Kalen's palms clenched tightly into fists. The pain of his fingernails digging deep into his flesh made him quickly sober up from his astonishment. Then he gathered his magic power into his eyes. His worry-colored eyes glowed slightly, attempting to see through this exquisitely crafted illusion. After 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds passed. The text in front of him still showed no change. This meant that either this identity bestowed by heaven and household was real, or the other party's illusion or some kind of magic. It had already reached the point where even the powerful experts of the star-unconnected realm couldn't see through it. In any case, this meant that the other party was worthy of his utmost cautious treatment. Thinking of this, Kalen quickly withdrew his magic power. And he was robust. The indifferent expression on her face, her expression was swiftly replaced by a radiant something to the point of even slightly fawning. A flattering smile replaced it. Since becoming a lord, he didn't seem to show such an expression again. After all, there was no need to perform anymore. Fearing his smile might be to fake, and would be seen through by that highness, Kalen walked nervously towards the young man. He stood to the side. Is he Viscount Hughes, the Lord of Blackwolf Ridge? You sat on the chair, gazing at the person opposite from afar. A mature young man who looked to be in his early 30s. Immediately after becoming a university student, you had an all-round improvement in your physical attributes, such as strength, speed, stamina, and even your eyesight improved. Therefore, you could clearly see that the newcomer was very tall and strong. This was your first impression. Your bare height was 1.83 meters, which was considered tall even on Blue Star. But that man wearing a black suit, whose muscles couldn't be hidden by it, was at least 1.93 meters tall. And coupled with that broad, imposing physique, at a glance, it truly gave him a Blue Star native a small shock. You had no doubt about the Viscount's martial prowess. After all, just from his appearance, even if 3 soul-locking knights came, they wouldn't be his match. Besides his appearance, another thing that caught his attention was above the man's head. There was a line of emerald green text, noble, concise, and to the point. Without a doubt, this would be your first encounter with the ruling class of this world. You still had some vigilance in your heart. Your forehead, even because of the nervousness and hot weather, was slightly sweating. But after a moment, you relaxed, because you saw that noble Viscount standing frozen in place, dumbfounded, staring intently at you, wide-eyed, or rather, at the text above your head, staring so hard his eyes seemed to glow dry, and willing to look away. Stop looking, no matter how much you look. It's real. You picked up the goblet on the table filled with bright red fruit wine. You took a sip of wine under the shade of the filial piety oak. Respected Highness, I am the Lord of Black Wolf Ridge, Kalen Hughes, Viscount of the Kingdom of Xianxia. Thank you for gracing my territory with your presence. This is my highest honor. Kalen placed his right hand on his left shoulder, then bowed slightly, and said humbly with a brilliant smile. As a noble, even if the other party's status is extremely noble, he doesn't need to kneel. Of course, provided the other party is not his liege, the king, or the eternal throne of mystery. You slightly raised your hand, signaling for the other party to sit. Thank you for granting me a seat, Kalen thanked as he sat down, while secretly observing the other's appearance. Fair skin, long, slender, delicate fingers, a strong noble aura. Although he couldn't recognize the style, the clothes were clearly made of high-grade material. From these details, Kalen could already conclude whether this highness's identity was real or not. He must have been born into a very wealthy family. Besides that, he glanced at the other party with the corner of his eye. Those flawless obsidian-like eyes, and a perfect profile. He mused. This highness is actually as handsome as him. Kalen couldn't help but exclaim in his heart. At this point, Kalen's trust in this highness's identity was already largely established. After all, handsome looks were on the entire continent one of the most common characteristics among nobles. Just as the founder of the noble system, Grand Duke Cameron's famous saying goes, "The noble must be beautiful, Highness." May I inquire your esteemed name? Kalen said with a slight smile, his low voice carrying a hint of respect. You picked up the wooden wine bottle, poured wine into the cup in front of Kalen. You are truly too polite. This scene made Kalen feel somewhat overwhelmed. He quickly took the wine bottle and poured his own wine. At the same time, he didn't forget to refill the other's cup. Karen carefully recalled his memories, but found no record of this surname family on the continent. He was certain that this family absolutely did not exist on the Western continent, because, if such a unique noble surname truly existed, he would definitely have heard of it. It seemed he truly was the prince of the super kingdom that ruled the entire Eastern continent. No, he still needed to be more cautious. He would conduct one last test. Your Highness Mingyu, to express my gratitude for your visit, I have specially prepared a gift for you. May I present it to you? Karen said gently. His casual words often lead to missteps. It would be better for him to speak less. Then I shall go fetch the gift now. Please wait a moment. So Karen stood up from his chair, bowed slightly, and then turned to leave. Several minutes later, he returned, carrying an exquisite wooden box. Your Highness, this is the gift I prepared for you. Karen placed the wooden box on the stone table. You carefully scrutinized the wooden box on the table. You noticed that on the top of the wooden box, a lifelike fox head was carved. This was a blessing gift specially given by my wife Daniel's mother, my mother-in-law Countess Martha, when I got married in the past, Karen introduced sincerely. Upon hearing this, a hint of expectation couldn't help but flash in your eyes. After all, in the Middle Ages, a noble countess could certainly be called a person of high status and power. And a blessing gift she meticulously prepared to give to her own daughter on her wedding day must surely be this world's priceless treasure, difficult to obtain even with 1,000 gold coins. For example, dragon eggs often seen in fantasy novels, magic potions, magical artifacts, or extraordinary items like spellbooks. Noticing the expectation in your expression, Karen smiled slightly and slowly opened the wooden box. Click! A beautiful wine glass was revealed. It was entirely crafted from crystal clear glazed glass. The body of the cup was as thin and light as a cicada's wing, and its rim was smooth and round. Sunlight, refracted through the cup's walls, cast a dazzling ray of colorful light, as if a rainbow had been crushed and blended into it. It was truly magnificent. As he opened the wooden box, Karen's worried eyes closely observed your facial expression, not missing any subtle change. This glazed glass cup is a treasure of the Martha family, known as the Rainbow Chalice. A noble marquis once offered a high price of hundreds of gold salt to buy it, but Countess Martha still refused. It was only when his wife, that is, Countess Martha's only daughter Daniel, got married, that it was given as a blessing gift. His wedding was quite the sensation among the southern nobility. Therefore, if this Your Highness Mingyu truly is the prince from the super kingdom of the eastern continent, then he might be pleased to see the rainbow chalice, but he would certainly not be overly surprised, nor would he show any greed. This was precisely his trump card to verify the other party's identity. However, unexpectedly, upon seeing such a treasure, your expression was neither delight nor astonishment, but disappointment. Gazing at the glass cup in the wooden box, your mouth twitched. Why does this thing look so much like a cheap water cup from Pinduoduo? 9.9 yuan with free shipping, and the kind that even old people dislike. Such an old-fashioned item. You forcibly suppressed your inner disappointment. You tried your best to force a smile. After all, it was a gift from the other party. Showing too much disappointment would be a bit impolite. He actually completely disdains the rainbow chalice. Looking at the extremely forced smile on the young man's face before him, Karen felt a shock in his heart. Just how wealthy a family must it be to raise a noble son who looks down on such a treasure? Lord Karen, may I ask if this cup has any special abilities? You thought perhaps you were too imperceptive to recognize a true treasure. So, he asked. This question stumped Karen's special ability. This glazed cup is so beautiful. Is beauty not enough? The cup of rainbows. It can make any liquid presented in it taste sweeter. After a moment of deep thought, Karen came up with an ability. Hearing this, you excitedly picked up the wine bottle and filled the cup of rainbows with bright red fruit wine. Then you drank it all in one gulp. There was no change at all. On your face, a hint of disappointment was inevitably revealed. What a truly wonderful gift. Hey, you praised, forcing a smile. After all, you were still in his territory. Even if he'd given you a rock, you would have said the same. It's real. It must be real. This person, this noble highness, must be the prince from the eastern continent's super kingdom. Your Highness. Karen, who had witnessed the changes in your facial expressions throughout, screamed frantically in his heart. Then, a nobleman's basic training made him quickly assess the value of this situation. An heir from a super kingdom on another continent had unexpectedly found his way here. It couldn't be ruled out that he was fleeing after being pursued by enemies, but if he could seize this opportunity, it would undoubtedly be a heaven-sent chance. After all, even setting aside the value of the enormous kingdom with 1.4 billion citizens behind the other party, the individual himself was already extremely valuable. Whether it was the university student's entirely new commoner profession, or the knowledge of another continent that he possessed, or his incredibly noble identity, or the unknown abilities he brought with him, all were enough to make the entire Western continent's nobles, and even the high and mighty king, look upon him with reverence. Karen Hughes's personal impression of himself had always been that of a tireless horse. But today, he felt he might also be able to learn from his mount and try being a dog. Under the shade of the old oak tree, respected Prince Mingyu, I have an impertinent request. I wonder if you would be willing to hear it. After clinking the tombstone in his hand against your cup of rainbows a few times, Karen eagerly spoke. Please, speak. Seeing the other party's face, with a smile as radiant as the warm spring sun, and sensing his goodwill, you added a please to your reply. You had originally considered maintaining a cool and aloof demeanor, but as the saying goes, one doesn't strike a smiling face. This Viscount Hughes was clearly a formidable man at first glance. He was already so friendly, smiling and giving you gifts. If you still maintained your aloofness, it wouldn't be good if you angered him and got beaten to death. Your Highness, your presence in my territory is my supreme honor. Therefore, I humbly ask that you allow me to extend my hospitality as the lord of this land. Karen glanced at the crude houses made of thatch and wood, and the muddy pots in the village, then spoke again. Although this village in my territory is peaceful, it is too dilapidated. How could it possibly befit your noble status? Your Highness, my Hughes family's ancestral castle is quite spacious, and can barely serve as a place for your Highness to stay. I humbly ask you to condescend and honor it with your presence. I swear to you on my honor as a knight, you will be the most honored guest since this castle was built. The servants, I will order them to treat you with 10 times the respect they show me. It wasn't you, Kalen, who rose from the chair, his right hand placed on his left shoulder, bowing slightly towards you. His voice was low and gentle, and you could sense his frankness and sincerity. Tap tap. Your fingers unconsciously tapped the armrest of the chair. Looking at Viscount Hughes, who was still bowing before you, you fell into thought. Should I go or not? Going there clearly carried certain risks. A medieval castle was not merely a residence. More importantly, it was a small military fortress. If his identity were to be exposed there, he would truly be unable to escape. Even with wings, you could only sit there and wait for death. But your gaze gradually became firm. You wanted to survive in this completely unfamiliar world. What was most important at the moment was not strength, but knowledge. You had to understand this world's past, present, and its elusive future. You needed to understand the people of this world, or rather, the deeply ingrained common sense of the nobles. For this, you would not hesitate, even at the risk of your life. If he went to the castle, he would quickly acquire this common knowledge. But if he didn't go, he would remain in the small Gulen village, among those villagers who had never left the village in their entire lives, flaunting his power. Then, still knowing nothing about this world, he would sooner or later face a catastrophic disaster. So, wasn't it obvious what choice should be made? You, Hughes, realizing it, slowly said, I look forward to your hospitality. In an instant, this powerful figure, who had escaped death multiple times from the cruel Dragon Master War, a conflict comparable to a meat grinder, showed an unprecedented ecstasy. On his sharply defined face, an unprecedented ecstasy appeared. It's a great honor. At dusk, you, having packed your luggage, took Anelia and Borg, and bid farewell to the people of Gulen village under the old oak tree. Your Highness, everything you've done for Gulen village is etched in my heart. May the radiance of the God of Sun and Justice forever shine upon you. Robert's eyes welled up with tears, his weathered face filled with gratitude. He bowed deeply and said, "Meanwhile, the other villagers knelt on one knee, looking at the middle-aged man before you, who, though not old, was burdened with worry until his hair turned white. You softly sighed. When you first met this middle-aged man in a sheepskin robe, you had thought him too charming, and dressed better than the surrounding villagers, and thus concluded he must be some kind of petty person. But now, you realized how foolish your thoughts had been then. This was a noble person, a respected elder. I merely did what was my duty, and you are too." Gently taking Robert's arms, you helped him up, and whispered in his ear, "May the gods bless you." You, too, played along with the local customs. The elder was so moved he was in tears. Next, Robert spoke privately with Borg and Anelia. "Borg, you are a good lad. Thanks to you for saving His Highness from the wolf pack. Gulen village could be saved." "Thank you." Robert patted Borg's shoulder and thanked him sincerely. "Village chief, you don't need to thank me. The person you should thank most is yourself." The young man shook his head and calmly said, "If you hadn't disregarded the objections of others back then, and insisted on taking me in, I would have starved or frozen to death long ago. In that case, His Highness would have merely become a wolf's prey." Robert silently raised his fist. Borg's demeanor instantly changed. "My lord is blessed by the gods. Even without me, he would surely turn misfortune into blessing." Only then did Robert, satisfied, lower his fist. Looking at the young man's slightly childish face, covered in bruises, he sighed deeply, and instructed, "Borg, you must remember, no matter when or where, no matter who asks, even if it's your own son, the answer is never that you saved His Highness, but that His Highness saved you from the wolf pack. Remember that His Highness is a good person. He might treat you as a friend, but he can never be your friend. He can only be your lord. You must engrave this point into your soul. You must remember to obey all of His Highness's commands, even commands that are absolutely wrong. You can make a mistake, but you must never fail to act." After giving countless instructions, Robert looked at the determined young man before him, and suddenly smiled. "Bon voyage. May you always walk on the path of pursuing your dreams. May the gods bless you, my child." The youth silently gave Robert a hug, then turned and left. He disliked goodbyes, because goodbyes carried the risk of loss. He would surely see his family again. Next is Anelia. "My daughter, you must remember, Your Highness may like you very much now, but a man's love is like a woman's beauty, fleeting. Once he wakes, he'll forget. Though His Highness is a good man, he is still a man." Robert earnestly instructed the girl before him. "A prince as noble and handsome as His Highness is a potent poison to all women. Many girls will fall in love with him. Among them, there will surely be those as beautiful as you, or even more beautiful. Therefore, you must never become arrogant because of your beauty and favor. Do not even entertain the thought of demanding His Highness to love only you. Such a foolish idea. To His Highness, you must be obedient. Obedience is paramount. His Highness may not love you, but you absolutely cannot not love His Highness. If possible, conceive a child with His Highness as soon as you can. A mother's status comes from her child." As he was giving instructions, Robert suddenly froze, as if he had thought of something. He slapped himself hard. Then he knelt before Anelia. "If only you weren't my daughter." Robert's voice was filled with sorrow. The expression on his face was as if he had committed something unforgivable. Yes, as a father, yet failing to grant his daughter the right to be born happy. Isn't this a sin in itself? The girl gently wiped away the tears from the man's eyes. Then, on the man's weathered, wrinkled face, she planted a soft kiss. Perhaps it was not an honor to become a deeply cherished daughter, but to be your daughter is the greatest honor in my life. She smiled, a radiant smile appearing on her face, brighter than ever before, along with a trace of tears. The night was as dark as ink, silently enveloping the sky. Only a few scattered stars and a full moon hung high. At the entrance of Guolan village, after bidding farewell to the villagers, you brought Anelia and Burke to the designated meeting point. Viscount Hughes and his party were already waiting there. Your Highness, Karen bowed deeply, while Sir Thorin and the guards all deeply bowed. When his lord is present, his attendants and servants must not show familiarity to others, unless his lord also kneels. Please allow me to escort you to the carriage. Karen stood before the luxurious carriage, covered in purple velvet drapes, and said. Then, with a glance, he signaled a guard, who unhesitatingly knelt down on the left side of the carriage's front step, acting as a step. I can get in by myself. You were not accustomed to stepping on people's backs to board a vehicle, so you boarded from the other side of the carriage's front step. Then you waved to Anelia and Burke, and they also followed your example, boarding from the other side. Because Anelia was only about 1.6 meters tall, you had to pull her up to help her get into the carriage. Seeing that all three had entered the carriage, Karen then sat in the coachman's seat at the front of the carriage, on the position, and picked up the reins tied to the two black steeds. Your Highness, the sky is dark, and the road is not smooth. I have night vision. If you don't mind, allow me to drive the carriage for you. I guarantee there won't be a single bump during the journey, Karen said calmly. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone except you, including Anelia and Burke, all looked at Karen with a look of shock and disbelief. As a noble aristocrat, and furthermore, the Lord of Blackwolf Ridge, to actually do the work of a mere coachman, even if the passenger's status was incredibly noble, it was simply too incredible to fathom. Your Excellency, Viscount, thank you for your kindness. I truly dislike bumpy rides. You may drive the carriage then. After a moment of silence, you spoke. Then, without waiting for Colin to reply, he continued, addressing Borg. Go down and chat with Sir Thorin. I remember you said his swordsmanship was very good before. As you command, my lord. Without hesitation, Borg jumped off the carriage. Then Sir Thorin pulled him onto a horse. The two rode on the same horse. Seeing this scene, although Colin's expression remained unchanged, a hint of admiration couldn't help but rise in his heart. This Highness truly handles things flawlessly. No wonder he is heir to a nation of 1.4 billion citizens, a superpower. Although he was the one who offered, but in front of so many servants and well-wishers, honestly, as a coachman, he must still have some reservations in his heart. After all, there isn't just His Highness alone in the carriage. Even that hunter attendant wearing linen clothes was also present. And your action not only accepted his kindness, but also saved his face. Is this what true vision is? Colin thought to himself that he should learn a bit of it too in the future. As for that maid, in aristocratic circles, a maid is not considered a person. She can only be said to be an object. Isn't it perfectly reasonable to have an object in the carriage? After everything was arranged, they set off. Colin waved his hand grandly and spiritedly cracked the whip, just like every fisherman who caught a big fish, rushing home. He was already impatient to move the mountain of gold from the carriage back to the castle, to show his wife and daughter. Clap clap. Accompanied by the dull whinnies, the carriage set off. The convoy headed towards the full moon ahead. Promptly. What will the future hold? You, inside the carriage, leaned back on the soft sofa, pulled back the window curtain, gazing at the dense forest flashing by outside the window, and the bright moon hanging high in the sky. You thought to yourself, in this fantasy world where even eternal gods and creators exist, what kind of ending would he ultimately face? Life or death? Mediocrity or glory? A hint of melancholy flashed in your eyes. He felt that he currently was like a single leaf on a vast ocean. All around were strong winds and torrential rain, and you didn't know when it would stop. Nor did you know if the dark silhouette ahead was an island or a whirlpool. As you mused idly, drowsiness began to set in, causing him to gradually fall into a warm slumber. Viscount Hughes's words were actually true. There was indeed not a single bump. The full moon hung high. Silver moonlight poured down like a waterfall, illuminating the dozens of meters high structure ahead, like a silent giant, a black fortress standing on the earth, staining it with a layer of grayish blue. Thump thump thump. After several hours of travel, a luxurious carriage, escorted by several mounted guards, arrived at Black Wolf Regiscore. Good Treasure Castle. The guards on duty that night, upon seeing this scene, all revealed expressions of shock. Because, by the moonlight, they could clearly see, the coachman driving that carriage was actually their great and aloof lord, Colin Hughes, the lord of humble grandeur. For a moment, the guards thought they were seeing an illusion. It wasn't until they exchanged glances with their comrades that they confirmed this fact. Subsequently, their hearts were even more shaken. The guest in that carriage, what noble status did they possess that would make their lord willing to be a coachman? A national noble, marquis, duke, or perhaps, within the kingdom of Xianxia, the most supreme royalty. Thinking of this, the guards dared not be negligent. Without waiting for Colin to speak, they quickly opened the city gate. Accompanied by the heavy creaking sound, the castle gate slowly opened. The drawbridge chains also slowly turned. The bridge plank steadily lowered onto the opposite bank of the moat. Your Highness has already arrived at my castle. Kalin twisted his head and shouted towards the carriage behind him. A moment later, a soft female voice came from inside the carriage of Viscount Hughes. My master has fallen asleep. As a maidservant, I dare not disturb my master's beautiful repose. Could you please send a few maidservants to carry my master into the room? That Highness can even sleep soundly in my carriage. Hearing this, a trace of pride rose in Kalin's heart. After all, this was the best proof of his driving skills. And he had not violated his knightly promise. There wouldn't be a single bump. Miss Amelia, let me do it, instead of the maidservants. I have a lot of experience in controlling my strength. If I were to carry His Highness, only then can I ensure His Highness's sweet dreams will not be disturbed, Kalin said in a deep voice. As Chen Xing's direct knight, his strength was enough to easily bend steel, but in daily life, he could steadily pick up a teacup and embrace his wife. His control over his strength had long since reached a state of perfect mastery. Thank you for your trouble, Viscount Hughes. After a moment of silence, a hesitant voice finally came from inside the carriage. Kalin walked into the carriage. A moment later, he carried the sleeping Yu and stepped into the castle. After settling His Highness and his retinue, Kalin hurriedly walked towards his bedroom. He had to immediately have a good talk with his wife, Danielle, about how to deal with and host this noble prince from the eastern continent. The first ray of sunlight the next morning passed through the tall arch window, quietly sprinkled into the castle room, casting long, thin streaks of light on the carpet. Feeling a warm sensation on your face, you slowly opened your eyes. This truly is, since crossing over, the most satisfying sleep I've had. You leisurely stretched, then looked around. You were currently in an extremely spacious room. The floor was covered with various colored carpets. The edges of the carpet were slightly curled up, revealing the cold, solid floor beneath, forming a warm contrast. Exquisite murals were carved on the walls. On both sides of the room, there was a bronze candlestick. Below the candlestick was a lifelike, open-mouthed wolf's head. A faint woody fragrance permeated the room, mixed with the coolness of the morning, making one feel exceptionally refreshed. This one room is almost as big as 10 university, 6-person dorm rooms combined, you exclaimed. You glanced at the layered bedding beneath you, smooth to the touch like flowing water, and somewhat understood why you slept so well last night. Feudalism, though utterly evil, is also truly decadent. Last night, it seems someone carried me into the room. Was it Amelia? That really put him out as you got out of bed and put on the neatly folded pajamas placed on the nightstand. You secretly thought. After putting on your pajamas, you then opened the room door and walked out. Someone was already waiting in the corridor outside the door. It was an old man wearing a black tailcoat. His collar and cuffs were embroidered with exquisite silver patterns, appearing solemn and elegant. His silver hair was meticulously combed, his face covered with wrinkles, yet exuding a sense of deep composure and majesty. And behind him, there were also two maidservants wearing black and white maid outfits. Their hair was neatly tied back, revealing smooth foreheads and young, pretty faces. Respected Honorary Highness, I am Xian, the butler of Black Wolf Castle. By my master's command, I am waiting for you here. May you have a wonderful morning. Old Xian placed his right hand on his left shoulder, bowed slightly in salute. While behind him, the two maidservants neatly crossed their hands and curtsied. Where are my attendants and maidservants? You looked at the empty corridor. He frowned slightly and asked. In a brand new and unfamiliar environment, your first reaction is to find an acquaintance. Your Highness. They were assigned to the rooms on the floor below this one. They were exhausted from last night's journey, and were still fast asleep. Do you need me to summon them for you? Old Xian's voice was calm, steady, and clear. No need. You shook your head. Knowing they were still here was enough. There was no need to disturb them. You're not some kind of ruthless boss who deprives employees of their sleep. Your Highness, my master, Viscount Hughes, asked me to inform you that, at sunset tonight, he will host a family dinner to entertain you. Besides yourself, the attendees will only be my master and his most cherished family members. Furthermore, my master has already informed all the servants of Langhao Castle that they must not disobey any of your commands, and must show you 10 times the respect they show him. Do you have any instructions? Your Highness. Old Xian said respectfully. Butler, can you take me to the castle's library? After a moment of silence, you stated your biggest objective for staying at the castle. It would be my honor. Your Highness. Xian replied without the slightest hesitation. Your Highness. This is Black Wolf Castle's library. It was established 100 years ago by the first Viscount Hughes, and has since been continuously expanded by successive Viscounts Hughes. It is one of the Hughes family's most precious treasures. Old Xian stood before a closed, massive door, slowly recounting. Your hands slightly sweated, and a trace of anticipation flashed in your dark eyes. Your Highness, I do not have the right to enter here. Therefore, please open the door and enter by yourself. I will leave immediately. After Old Xian bowed slightly, he quickly departed. Even the old butler, who had worked in the castle for decades, did not have the right to enter the library. Gazing at the butler's departing back, your expression became serious. You realized how severely this world's ruling class restricted knowledge. If it weren't for this 1.4 billion identity blessing above my head, I'm afraid I would struggle my entire life in this world and still not gain the right to enter here. You couldn't help but exclaim in your heart. Next, you no longer hesitated. You raised your hand, pushed open the massive door, and walked inside. Black Wolf Castle Library. After pushing open the heavy, massive door, what appeared before you was a sight that seemed to engulf the entire space, rows upon rows of towering bookshelves extending to the ceiling. The air was permeated with the faint scent of books and raw wood. Sunlight streamed through the colorful stained glass windows, spilling onto the floor, forming dappled light and shadows. It made one feel sleepy. Just having woken up, you wanted to sleep again. In a certain sense, a library could also be considered a blessing for insomniacs. Your mouth twitched. You certainly hadn't forgotten your purpose for coming here. You had to quickly acquire the common knowledge of this world's nobles from here, so that you could have a clear understanding of your current situation, identity, and what needed to be done. The number of books is far greater than I imagined. You weaved through the layers of bookshelves, looking at the dazzling piles of books. You couldn't help but exclaim. One could imagine that for the past 100 years, successive generations of Hugh's family patriarchs had probably spared no effort in collecting books. Only then, in this world resembling a medieval setting, could they have collected so many books. But with so many books, how can I find the books I need? You rested your chin in your hand, falling into deep thought. On the bookshelves of this library, there didn't seem to be any classification. Therefore, if you were to search book by book, you might not find what you need even by nightfall. If only there was a librarian. While pondering a solution, you unconsciously walked back and forth between the bookshelves. Wait. What's that? You stopped. Your gaze fell upon a gap between the bookshelves. Through the gap, you saw an exquisite hammock. On the hammock, there seemed to be a person lying down. Could it be Viscount Hughes? Did they really assign an administrator here? With this thought in mind, you walked around the bookshelf towards that hammock. After getting closer, only then did you clearly see the person on the hammock. That was a girl who looked no older than 13 or 14. Her silver-white long hair, like a waterfall, cascaded down onto the edge of the vine-woven hammock. Her hair, under the sunlight by the window, shimmered with a faint luster. Her face was only slightly larger than an adult's palm. Her lips, tacitly appreciated, were as tender as newly bloomed cherry blossoms. Beneath her porcelain white skin, faint blue veins were faintly visible. Her slender, silver-white eyelashes trembled slightly. She was curled up in the hammock. The light pink silk nightgown slipped down to the back of her knees, revealing her exceptionally white calves and well-proportioned, delicate feet. What a cute girl, you couldn't help but exclaim in your heart. Although Xianxia was also very beautiful, her beauty was of a gentle, soft, divine nature, making people unconsciously fall for her, but not to the point of giving rise to overly profane desires. But this girl before your eyes was different. Her silver-white hair and petite, perfect figure, it was simply blue. A super agent for a certain type of group close to one's heart. With a soul-stirring charm. Just like a devil. However, it seems she shouldn't be the library administrator. You glanced at the white text above her head. You sighed lightly. A noble, presumably, this girl should be a family member of Viscount Hughes. Probably his daughter or younger sister or something. Let's go browse the bookshelves again. Just as you were about to leave, the eyelashes of the deeply sleeping girl on the hammock trembled slightly. After she let out a few kitten-like whimpers, she slowly straightened up and stretched. She slowly opened her eyes, revealing a pair of somewhat dazed, heterochromatic eyes. Her left eye was vivid red like fresh blood, and her right eye was pale like ashes. These two completely different colors, on her palm-sized, delicate and pretty face, created a breathtaking sense of beauty. The girl gently propped herself up. The straps of her nightgown slipped a little from her shoulders, revealing a patch of snow-white skin. As if she had just woken up, the employee whose mind hadn't yet processed it. She stared blankly at you in front of her, as cute as a kitten. What beautiful eyes, you and the girl said in unison. The two of you froze for a moment, a trace of surprise flashing across both your faces. The girl was about to open her mouth to ask, but suddenly noticed the text above your head. Heir to a kingdom of 1.4 billion citizens. Her pupils suddenly constricted. The you who blurted out instantly fell silent. Then, with a nimble flip, she jumped down from the hammock. She respectfully bowed and stood before you. Greetings to your highness, she added softly. Your esteemed highness. Her voice was a little soft, giving one the feeling of wanting to hug her. You first inquired about the girl's identity. I am Elise Hughes, Elise, Viscount Hughes's daughter, replied. May I ask? A noble person such as yourself, why would you be here? Elise looked around, and after confirming it was her family's library, only then did she cautiously ask. If you don't wish to answer, that's perfectly fine. For someone as esteemed as your highness, it should be me answering your questions, Elise added. While speaking, she secretly glanced several times at the identity mark above your head. The fellow again placed his right hand behind his back, fiercely pinching her own waist to feel the pain. Only then did she confirm that she wasn't in a dream. But if it wasn't a dream, this young man before her, with eyes like obsidian, and beautiful eyes, why would he have such a fellow of incredibly noble status? 1 point for billion people of Socha, Milan, and Rhine, the citizens of the 3 great human kingdoms combined, definitely did not amount to such a terrifying number. And such an important personage appearing in one's own library. It was too bizarre. I am Mingyu, at the invitation of your father, Viscount Hughes. I will be temporarily residing at Blackwolf Castle for a period of time, you calmly said. So that's how it is. This is the supreme honor of the Hughes family. I wish you a pleasant stay. Lilith subconsciously wanted to curtsy, but after extending her hand, she realized she was currently wearing a nightgown. Her snow-white face immediately flushed slightly. Her hand awkwardly hung in the air. To curtsy was awkward. Not to curtsy was also awkward. If she were to curtsy, too much skin would be revealed. But if she didn't curtsy, and if this noble highness considered it disrespectful, then she would surely be ostracized in noble circles. No need to curtsy. Could you do me a favor? You seemed to have noticed her predicament. You calmly said. I'm looking for books about mythology. Do you know which shelf in this library they are on? Mythology books. Elise thought for a moment and replied. Are usually on the 3rd row of the 7th bookshelf. Elise thought for a moment and replied. Thank you. Your eyes lit up. You quickly walked towards the 7th bookshelf. In this world where gods truly exist, and disregard all living beings, what could be more captivating? A moment later, Elise saw you walk back with a book tucked under your right arm. Miss Elise, could I borrow your hammock? You asked, half-jokingly. You really didn't want to stand and read. That would truly be like dreaming back to high school. How awkward. It's my honor. Although Elise was not very willing in her heart, she still respectfully agreed on the surface. Lying on this comfortable hammock woven from vines and soft silk, you stretched leisurely. Then you rested your head on a velvet pillow, intently flipping through the book in your hand. Elise, having relinquished her spot on the hammock, could only stand meekly by the side. She wanted to go back to her bedroom to catch up on sleep, but also felt that leaving without permission would be disrespectful to His Highness Mingyu. So she could only stand by the hammock like a servant, waiting for your instructions. Creation myths. She secretly glanced at the book in your hand. A hint of surprise flashed in her flawless, ruby-like eyes. Isn't this the children's book that all nobles must read in their childhood? Could His Highness Mingyu be trying to reminisce about his childhood? Elise speculated in her heart. You didn't notice her hidden gaze. Your entire focus was already absorbed by the book in your hand. Half an hour later, and the minister, your mood had become turbulent. This is truly incredible. Are these all true? You asked Elise, who was standing obediently beside you. Hearing this, Elise was startled. Your Highness, questioning myths will lead to judgment by the church. Please be careful with your words. Of course. Your noble status means you should have no taboos. Elise was about to advise, but then she glanced at the text above your head. Her attitude immediately changed. Just kidding. The heir to a kingdom of 1.4 billion people. Let alone questioning myths. Even if you curse the Pope to his face, I'm afraid nothing serious would happen. After all, That number is truly terrifying. Unless the gods themselves intervene. Otherwise, the status of this highness is enough to place him above anyone. It seems the church's status is quite exalted in this fantasy world. You observed Elise's reaction and thoughtfully said, "Let's put myths aside for now. What I should read next should be about this world's direct connections to status and household classifications, among other things. Elise, could you fetch me books about households?" "My pleasure, Your Highness." Elise instinctively stood straighter and replied. It was her first time being treated as a servant. This feeling is quite peculiar. A moment later, from the dozen or so books brought by Elise, you married away the household you knew. Then you opened the book page. You once again became engrossed in reading. What are called households are the heaven's profound love for all intelligent beings. They are divided into status households and profession households. Two types. But the promotion ranks are consistent, ranging from mortal rank to eternal sun rank, respectively. A total of 8 ranks. The corresponding colors are white, emerald green, purple, blue, ice blue, silver, red, and gold. Status households are innate. Profession households, however, are a summary of one's past life. Regardless of status or profession, fame and great achievements are the tools for advancement. True powerhouses cannot be lonely and nameless. Gazing at the great undertaking. Reading this made your expression change. You realized that this world's advancement system seemed quite different from what you had imagined. It wasn't like those Xianxia novels on Langshan, where one diligently cultivates to advance. The advancement system was more like the advancement system in some dungeon-themed Japanese manga anime. You somewhat understood why people in this world valued status so highly, and why such a rigid class system had emerged. After all, what means do ordinary people have to gain fame and forge great achievements? In contrast, nobles could easily gain fame through various commercial self-promotion. Or rather, like a lord who controls countless people in their territory, a fortunate noble whose very existence is a form of renown. Perhaps this is also why noble households bring all sorts of benefits, while commoner households can only make people more resistant to hunger. You thoughtfully said, "Elise, could you hand me that household codex?" A moment later, he took the book from the girl and continued to flip through it. Merchant. Deceptive merchant. Merchant. Rich merchant. Knight apprentice. Knight. Great knight. Magic apprentice. Magician. Mage. Hunter. Stalker. Huntmaster. After closing the books, you often heaved a sigh of relief. It wasn't until now that you finally felt you had a clearer understanding of this world. Besides that, you also felt a bit fortunate, because professions could be advanced across different paths. This meant that, even if his basic profession was university student, he could still advance to become a mage. Thinking of this, a glint of excitement flashed in your eyes. Having transmigrated to a fantasy world, who wouldn't dream of becoming a powerful spellcaster? Summoning storms and thunder with a raise of a hand was simply too cool. Elise, do you know anything about magic? Looking at the silver-haired girl beside you, whose face was slightly pale from standing for a long time, you, comfortably leaning in the hammock, felt a bit awkward. You suddenly realized you were a bit too greedy for enjoyment and love. My sin. My sin. The corruption of privilege comes too quickly. Your Highness, I am simply a magician. More accurately, I am the biological child of a magician girl. Next to the white noble type above her head, another line of emerald green text appeared. Magician. Miss Elise, could you teach me some magic?